Kanahagakure, October 10th. October 10th. A day that many in Kanahagakure, the village hidden in the leaves, held in utmost hatred. Why, you may ask? Simple, because that was the day that the almighty Kyubi no Kitsune attacked the village without any warning whatsoever. Konoha's population generally believed they were above everyone else in general. After all, their village was the most powerful of the 5 great villages. If anything happened to threaten them, then their extremely powerful ninja would protect them. They considered themselves invincible, and when the Kyubi came rushing over yonder hill, they believed that it was nothing major, that the ninja could take care of it with little difficulty. As a result, they were rather sluggish in the way of retreating to the shelters. This probably has something to do with the unprecedented massive amount of civilian casualties. But Konoha researchers have yet to give up any tangible findings. I wonder why. Regardless, that was considered the worst day in their village's history since Orochimaru fled the village. Because not only were the civilian casualties raised through the dam roof, but the shinobi body count was right up there with it. Many a chunin or rookie jounin had rushed the monster head on only to get flattened, eaten, burned to a crisp, or any combination of the 3. Genin, who had disobeyed orders to get the fuck out of there, had also gotten the same treatment. Most looked on the bright side of that particular score, though, less weaklings for Ibiki to sift though come chunin exams. The battle finally ended when the Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato, in a combination his infinite misplaced trust and simply great power, sealed the Kyubi into his own son, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. Note that only 2 people in the world knew that that was his name aside from the Yondaime himself. He had summoned the great Shinigami to do the job, and as a result he ripped the man's soul out of his chest and ate it. He seemed rather pissed off at the moment. Maybe his mumblings about, "Interrupt my golf game with Cammy. Immortal? Well, you got what you had coming, didn't you?" had something to do with his pissed-off status. Not that anyone heard him say it since he was on another plane of existence, but regardless, moving on. Now then, the current score was that a few hundred people were dead, civilians and shinobi alike, and the beast was sealed into an infant. Now then, this would have been fine and dandy if it wasn't for one major factor. The fact that the recently reinstated Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Sasuke, couldn't keep his mouth shut and actually trusted a bunch of frightened and angry people to make a halfway reasonable decision. The boy could have lived a normal life, free of hatred, but the moment he told the people of the village that the Kyubi was sealed into the boy, all hell broke loose. The people basically rushed the balcony the old man was on, yelling, "Kill the demon!" and the like, throwing empty liquor bottles at the child in question and other such violence. The Sandaime retreated to his office with the boy after ordering the ANBU to get the villagers back to their homes. The same day, a law was passed which forbade anyone from mentioning the Kyubi or its landlord to anyone in the younger generation, especially the boy himself. After all, it wouldn't do well if the boy actually knew why he was hated, would it? No, much better to let him wonder why. He couldn't know who his parents were either, no one could. IWA or Kumo would figure out and attempt to assassinate or kidnap him. He couldn't tell the boy either, he was to be put into an orphanage. After all, you can't trust kids these days. If you told him his father was the Yondaime, he would probably go into IWA and shout my dad was Konoha's Yellow Flash. In front of everybody, wouldn't he? Regardless of the reasons and poor judgment, the boy was put into an orphanage. It was a rather poor affair, but about half the council wanted to kill the boy and about another third of the remainder wanted him used as a weapon. Luckily, he was the Hokage and could override the council to a degree. All he could do is hope the boy turned out well and became an excellent shinobi and a patriot for his village. 1. Mind you, that feeling of trust didn't last long. What may have broken that trust, you may ask? It was probably when the 2 ANBU he had stationed to protect the boy went into his room and attempted to stab a kunai into the infant's jugular. Normally, this would have killed him and Konoha would live in peace. However, the word attempted was used for a reason. This reason was that the kunai was stopped mid-thrust. Not by a hand, not by any jutsu, but by a wall of solid darkness. A wall of shadow that had risen from the ground and stopped the knife cold. The shadows of the room all writhed suddenly and descended upon the 2 ninja. There was nothing in or around the room the next morning to prove that the 2 ninja were ever there. The only evidence, if you looked really closely, was in the top right corner of the ceiling and the ground near the bed. In the top right corner of the ceiling there was a very small bloodstain. On the ground near the bed of the sleeping child was a very small piece of triangular metal. This metal was coated in blood, and if you looked into it enough, you would realize that it was the point of a kunai knife. Kanahagakure. The day after the two shinobi vanished from the orphanage was pretty hectic for all involved. They had two shinobi missing, presumed dead, and the only evidence that they were even in the orphanage that night was a bloodstain, the broken-off tip of a bloody kunai, and about a dozen eyewitness accounts. Naturally, suspicion was placed upon the demon child for their murder, but the sandaime wouldn't hear a word against the boy. Eventually, the case was closed, with the most popular theory being that unknown assassins were going to attack the boy but were defeated and killed. They had managed to gravely injure the assassins, and the assassins fled, taking the murdered ANBU with them, but forgetting to take the boy. Once again, humanity proves that if they don't want something to exist, they have numerous means to rationalize it to conform to what they already know. And people still wonder how Orochimaru got out of the village without anyone seeing him. The years went on, and after the first dozen people went mysteriously missing, everyone eventually learned that they shouldn't attempt to murder the child in his sleep. That didn't stop them from attempting to poison the boy's food, writing insults and cruel words upon his walls and door, preparing traps to kill him, and other such nasty things. After the first few attempts on the boy failed, traps not killing him, poisons not working, assassins vanishing never to be seen again, one drunk old fool finally did it. He attacked the boy in public. Broken bottle in one hand and a knife in the other, he charged the boy in the street one day when he was ordered to go get medicine for the sick orphanage manager on October 10th. He had specific instructions to go to a specific pharmacy which was right on one of the more populated streets during the Kyuubi festival. The old man yelled out, "Die, demon!" as he ran toward the boy, attempting to cut the child with a knife, but the strangest thing happened. The knife was blocked by a sudden black wall. The crowd followed the wall and found that it stemmed from the shadow of a nearby building. Before the crowd's eyes, a tendril sprouted from that wall, wrapped around the man's neck and threw him into a side alley where he lost consciousness. The boy didn't react at all. He just turned around and continued on to the probably fake pharmacy. He wasn't surprised at all. He had seen that happen before, that and much worse. The crowd, however, went absolutely ballistic. What was once a silently glaring crowd with the occasional dark muttering became a stampede yelling, "The demon is attacking. Run for your lives," and "The demon is loose," and other such kind things. The boy eventually reached the address he was given by the manager. He looked at the paper in his hand, glad that the sandaime had taught him to read and write, and then looked at the address of the building again. They were the same. Then he looked at the building in question. It was an abandoned building that needed repairs 20 years ago. By this time, there was ivy growing on the walls up to the ceiling, and there wasn't an inch of unrotten wood to be seen. He sighed and went to return to the orphanage. The sandaime found him on the way there. He cried out, "Naruto, there you are. Come here, would you?" The boy approached the old man and he checked the boy over. "We need to talk, Naruto, about what happened earlier. Come on." He put his hand on the boy's shoulder and shunned to his office. Naruto sat down in the guest chair while old Sarutobi sat down in the larger, more comfortable Hokage's chair, and he looked at the boy. "I have heard stories, Naruto, but I want the truth directly from you. What did you do to that man in the street? Who taught you to use such abilities? Why did you attack the man in question? I need you to answer these truthfully, Naruto. If I went by the stories, you would be considered a monster by anyone's standards. So I need to know the truth, your perspective." The boy nodded and began his story. "No one really taught me anything, old man. The only one to ever teach me anything was you when you taught me how to read, write, and do simple math and that sort of stuff that everyone else got taught but wouldn't teach me. I don't know why, but that thing earlier, that just happens. It doesn't have anything to do with me, it just happens automatically without my doing anything. The man in the street was trying to kill me and the shadows reacted. I don't know what else to say." The boy looked sad and confused as he went on this tale, and sandaime just said, "I have one last question, Naruto. When did this all start? When did the shadows start protecting you?" Naruto just said, "For as long as I can remember." Sarutobi knew then that this all must have been Kyuubi's doing. Sarutobi looked at the boy and said, "Right. Well, Naruto, I don't want you using your abilities any more than you have to. Okay? People might get jealous of you, you know, and who knows what could happen." While he said this, he was thinking, "I will have to have Jiraiya look at the seal. These abilities might let the Kyuubi take over." Naruto nodded and asked, "Aji-san?" The ancient in question looked at the boy and said, "Yes, Naruto?" The boy looked down at his feet and mumbled something. The sandaime leaned closer and asked, "What was that?" Naruto looked up and asked Aji-san, "Can I live on my own? I really don't like it at the orphanage. Everyone treats me badly. No one pays any attention to me. The food is awful, and I would really like it somewhere else." The old man thought about it and where he should put the boy. "Well, there is that one building." He looked at the boy and said, "Okay, Naruto. I think that is fair enough given what I have put you through today." The boy nodded and the sandaime said, "Okay, let's go get your things." The boy looked at him and said, "What things?" "The only stuff I own is what I am wearing right now." The old man looked at the child in surprise and decided that he would be paying the orphanage a little visit later. He took the boy's hand and said, "Okay, Naruto. Now come on, we have to go to your new apartment." The boy went on, holding the man's hand, a smile on his face. A few hours, a heated negotiation, and some bought furniture later, and Naruto was now the proud tenant of apartment number 392, complete with second-hand furniture, mold behind the walls, and roaches and rats if you knew where to look. The sandaime left the boy alone in his new home. The moment the door was closed, the smile vanished and the boy's eyes gained the shadows of malice and cruelty, the false joy evaporating. "Idiot old man," the boy thought, honestly believing that he wouldn't figure out everything given the right clues. Naruto, sweet, innocent, and abused Naruto, wasn't as sweet and innocent as the old ruler believed. He had been avoiding trouble his whole life. His skills in stealth and secrecy weren't to be underestimated. He knew a lot more than he let on. Since the day he learned to read, he had been sneaking into the library, learning everything he could about every last subject. He had stumbled upon a great many things that no one knew was there. Some of them were high-class jutsu and others were secret reports that were probably put in the wrong place by tired bureaucrats. He already knew more than enough to figure out that he was the Kyuubi's vessel. The scroll on Jinchuriki that he had found had been a big tip. He had also managed to find out who his parents were. He had already decided 3 things. 1. He hated his father who had placed the village of ingrates before his own son. 2. He hated Konoha, which had made his life a living hell, had disobeyed its greatest leader's last wish and acted as if they were living gods. And 3. He hated the sandaime. That old bastard had the gall to lie to his face about who his parents were, who his tenant was, and other such important information. There were several things that he could not fucking stand, and being lied to was high up there. He was hoping the old man suffered before he died, and he hoped even more that he was able to watch. He had learned a lot from the library. Basic taijutsu and genjutsu as well as ninjutsu were found there quite easily. He also found a few scrolls on chakra control which were important, and even a few misplaced high-level ninjutsu scrolls. The one that he found most useful was the Kage Bunshin. Once he learned that, his rate of learning skyrocketed. He was able to spend more time on the training grounds and less time in the library after that. He had spent every possible moment out on the fields, undergoing monstrous training regimens to strengthen his pathetic form. He planned to be powerful. He could not abide by weakness in any form. His training really jumped ahead when he first met the Kyuubi. He did not show any fear before that massive demonic fox. He showed a bit of surprise when he found out that he was actually a she. She appeared as a tall woman with flowing red hair, long, slender legs, and crimson eyes with slit pupils. She appeared in a black kimono with no unnecessary adornment and had 9 flowing red tails. She had a decent-sized C-cup and had fangs that protruded slightly past her lips when she smiled. Also, she had a pair of cute fox ears of top of her head instead of normal human ears. She was overall very beautiful. Boy, was he surprised when she turned out to be as sadistic as he was. She had improved his already monstrously difficult and strenuous training regimen and improved his senses as well. One major thing he enjoyed was the improved sense of smell. This was because now he could literally smell when people were lying to him. She also improved his hearing and sight. He could hear anything as far as 1,000 meters with perfect clarity if he concentrated, and his eyes were amazing. He could pick out the smallest detail in anything he looked at and could see amazing distances. He could even predict where people were going to be before they moved, like the Sharingan could. Mind you, he had to do all the movement calculations in his head to do so. It wasn't automatic like the Sharingan was, nor could he copy jutsus. He had to work for his power. The best thing about it was that the senses didn't come in all at once. It happened little by little, day by day, so as not to overload him with information. The thing he loved most was that he was no longer entirely human. Kyuubi's presence in him was turning him into a Hanyu, a half-demon due to the demonic chakra flowing through him. It wouldn't be complete until he was about 11 though. Until then he was human. It was good to have something of a friend though, since she would be with him until he died. They were stuck together for the rest of time whether they liked it or not. He would gain her powers, but she would always be there even after her powers were fully assimilated, a consciousness within his own. One major benefit of half and eventually full demonhood was that he would not die by mortal means. Age, disease, and the like would never affect him, nor would poison, thanks to the demonic chakra in his system burning it away. He had been showed Kyuubi's memories too. She had been around for a lot longer than anyone had guesses, and he was not the only person to ever manipulate shadows or darkness. There were many others, and he learned from them. One major thing he learned was that 3 of the associates of one of his shadowy predecessors were still alive. The predecessor in question was called Gecko Moria, and he was extremely powerful. He learned a lot from watching Kyuubi's memories of him. Powerful magics involving shadows, the importance of underlings, and much more, including his methods on creating an army of the undead, which were actually pretty good. He looked up to him more than any of his other predecessors. He was ecstatic when he heard that his 3 main lieutenants were actually still alive after all these centuries. 2 of them, Absalom and a doctor called Hogback, had remained alive by having Hogback replace their aging body parts every few years and were still out there somewhere, and he made it a point to track them down at some point. Same goes for the 3rd lieutenant, a woman called Perona the Ghost Princess. She had remained alive by forever shedding her physical body and forever remaining as a ghost. The powers of Absalom and Perona would be useful, and Hogback was a doctor to rival Tsunade, even though his methods were different. He was determined to find them one day. He had also figured out why Kyuubi attacked Konoha. She was a guardian spirit for a certain place. Not Konoha, but for Iwa. She was royally pissed off at Minato for killing her people, and she went after him determined to send him to hell. She succeeded in her goal, but she never saw the seal coming. Still, she reasoned that it could have been worse. She could have been stuck with an idiot who wore an orange jumpsuit and yelled, "Believe it!" or "Databeo!" after every other sentence. Instead, she got a sadistic and manipulative boy with a hunger for power and knowledge that could burn someone with their intensity. Each day he placed Genjutsu, she taught him over his apartment and trained to the breaking point, smiling all the while as he felt his muscles contort and harden with each practice strike, as his aim gradually improved until he could take the wings off of a gnat with a kunai from 100 feet away without hurting the rest of the insect. All of this had one major flaw though. He was lazy. Not when it came to combat or training, but when it came to doing much, he preferred to get others to do it for him. He could hold his own, but why bother if your subordinates could do it for you? The question was where he would obtain subordinates. He was going to destroy Konoha, he needed an army. However, he couldn't leave Konoha, and by the nature of his goals and the locations he was limited to, he couldn't just open a recruiting office. So he planned to take a new path to domination. The first thing was space. He knew that all of the other tenants left soon after he moved in, so all he did was henge into some random schmuck and went to see the landlord with a plan to buy the building the demon was living in. After assuring the short and fat man that he indeed did know what he was buying, he managed to get the building at a fraction of what any other complex would cost. When he got home, he simply got out some stolen paperwork, signed some forms and turned them in at the appropriate places, and the deed was in his name. He was now the devious owner of a shitty apartment building. He decided that he could spruce the place up later. He also bought a new wardrobe with the stipend the old fool gave him. He hated the buzzard with a passion, but Naruto was a born actor. He knew that people who pitied you were the easiest people in the world to manipulate, second only to people who admired you, and he managed to slowly get the stipend increased, and that increased his savings since he no longer needed to pay rent since he owned the building. What he decided on was a pair of black pants taped off at the ankle and a pair of shinobi sandals. He decided upon a black long-sleeve spandex number to cover his chest. It clung to his body, revealing the well-developed muscles for someone his age, and some seals made it extremely resistant to damage, not to mention comfortable. Over that went a black trench coat with an abnormally large amount of pockets for holding equipment. He departmented the collar on the trench coat up and only the top 2 buttons buttoned, keeping his arms free, and finally, he bought a wide-brimmed black top hat to cover his blonde hair. He didn't want to be noticeable in the dark, and the hair was a dead giveaway. He also bought a large amount of ninja equipment and stole what he couldn't buy. He was quite the exceptional thief when the time called for it. Now that he didn't look like a scrawny brat that could easily be picked on. When he finally managed to get the basement stocked with the necessary materials, these included a large freezer, a metal slab complete with restraints, and a large number of medical tools, he bought a shovel and went grave digging. He came home the same night with 24 coffins in scrolls. He spent the rest of the day waiting while he prepared one of the bodies, making it stronger, more powerful, and more prepared for combat. Finally, the day came and some idiot ANBU decided to try and kill him in his sleep. The building was dark, and so Naruto had an immense advantage. The idiot probably didn't know about his abilities since he had been having a low profile lately, and he walked into the darkness, but he never walked out. Naruto stood before the man who kneeled in front of him, arms and legs bound by solid darkness. He had wanted to try this out for a while, but he never got the chance till now. He leaned in and said to the man, "Though you are a bigot and a fool, I must thank you for being my guinea pig." The man looked up at him with hate in his eyes, only to be backhanded across the face. "Now sit still," he commanded as a spotlight shone on him. Akage Bunshin went up to the man and squatted down. The clone of the boy did what the man had never expected and pulled his shadow up off the floor. Naruto approached in the darkness and pulled out the implement he had found in one of the coffins. Probably a chunin given the status of the grave, pretty old too. The implement was a gigantic battle axe as big as he was. With his strength, though, he was able to lift it, and he brought it down on the shadow near the man's feet. The axe cut through the shadow and the man fell unconscious. He took the shadow from the clone and went into his laboratory. He looked at his creation. It was twice as tall as a normal man and was much more muscular. It had claws instead of fingernails, and there was stitching over much of its body. He took the shrunken shadow of the disillusioned ANBU and slammed it into the dead body's chest. The shadow vanished into the creature's skin, and Naruto waited with bated breath, as did the Kyuubi. Within a minute, the beast's eyes fluttered and Naruto let out a laugh. "I did it!" he cried. "It works. It's alive. My first zombie is alive." He was the most happy he had ever been. This opened all sorts of doors, and he was looking forward to the fruits that the plans he could hatch with those open doors could bring. Naruto grew up and reveals that he already knew who his parents were, that he hates the village, the Sandame and Yandame. He knows that the Kyuubi is sealed within him and that it is female. He also has been training for a long time and is very strong. He has been grave robbing and has succeeded in bringing a zombie to life by removing a man's shadow and using to reanimate a corpse that he has strengthened. We left off there. Konohagakure, Naruto's basement lab. Naruto was happy. He was very happy. Why was he so happy? Because his idea had worked. At first, the leftover personality of the ANBU he captured allowed his new creation to disobey him, but after a little while that evaporated and the thing became totally obedient. At that point, the zombie, now known as Zombie 1, which was indicated by the small black one which was tattooed on the left side of his face above his eye since he wasn't going to bother to name any of his zombies save the most important ones, the zombie was released from his restraints and was coming to terms with his new undead status. Naruto smiled as he went through 4 quick hand seals and bathed the zombie in flame. He didn't flinch, nor did he ignite. Naruto smiled again. His seal had worked. Gecko Moria's zombies had 3 major weaknesses. The first was fire, but that was taken care of by a small yet powerful seal that made his zombies fireproof, which was now proved to work. The second was salt. This was a bit more vexing, for if a zombie ate salt, he was purified and the shadow he had inside the zombie would be freed. Alas, Naruto couldn't find any way around that one, but as long as only he knew, it wouldn't be any problem. The third and arguably greatest weakness was that if the shadow's donor died, then the shadow would vanish and the zombie would die too. This was dealt with by a small seal that kept the shadow in, but it had yet to be tested until now. Naruto had walked back where he left the unconscious ANBU. Removing someone's shadow had 2 effects on the person. The first was that they were automatically knocked out for at least 2 days. The second was that sunlight became anathema to them. It would dissolve their bodies like sugar in water. Naruto unsealed his axe and raised it over the man's head. He hoped his seal worked as he decapitated the man and blood spurted over the floor. Worst case scenario, he reasoned, I have a new marionette waiting for a shadow. He walked into his lab and looked for the zombie. There he was, walking around and moving just as he left him. Naruto smiled. His seal had worked. He brought in a coffin and put the newly dead body into it. If he strengthened it and gave it a shadow, the body wouldn't dissolve, even though the shadow once belonged to someone else. The ANBU would hopefully make a good zombie in the future. Over the next few weeks, numerous cases of grave robbing were reported in Konoha. Most of the deaths were only a few years old. A good 35% of the stolen bodies were the more intact victims of the Kyuubi attack. Naruto couldn't help but see the irony of it as he examined one of the bodies in the freezer. The warriors that fell to the great demon would be reborn simply to serve the creature they were killed by. Kyuubi found it amusing as well. Naruto had been keeping a low profile lately for the most part. He had the entire building to himself, and though it was a dump, he had managed to rig a very good defense for the place. The first thing he had done was establish an iron fence around the property. The only break in this fence was a large iron gate. This gate had a very thick border, and for a good reason. Naruto had rigged an invisible and high-powered barrier around the place. Anyone and anything that touched the thing would be incinerated. The gate's borders were specifically reinforced to withstand the power of the barrier, making it the sole entrance to the place. Well, the only safe entrance. The barrier also went underground to prevent people from getting in via dotonjutsus. He didn't have a lock on the gate though. He wanted people to get in. He just wanted them to go in through the front door. Mind you, he could open holes in the barrier for whatever reason, such as an escape route. No one saw much of the Jinchuriki over the next few months. The reason was simple: he was improving and exploring his abilities with shadows. Kyuubi asked him one day why he trained his body so hard if he was going to use the powers she gave him. One made the other obsolete. Not so, Kyuubi-chan. He answered her. True, the shadows do protect me a great deal, and despite all the attempts on my life, no one has broken them yet. But you can never be sure. I guarantee that one day I will face someone who is able to bypass that protection, and it is then that my taijutsu skills will show their worth. Kyuubi was skeptical, but she decided to trust his judgment. He hadn't been wrong yet after all. Though his taijutsu and genjutsu abilities were excellent, he was rather weak in the ways of ninjutsu. There were about 10 or so that he found useful, but he didn't know many that he used often. He preferred to use shadows and genjutsu rather than big flashy attacks that, for the most part, could be avoided by a simple kawarimi. Though if it came down to it, he did have some of the big flashy attacks, as he called them, on standby, just in case he needed to destroy a large or well-defended target. He was never one to leave himself without options. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it was his watchword. He spent a good many of his days training his shadow abilities, preparing bodies to accept a shadow and capturing idiot shinobi who tried to kill him. He didn't complain about the assassination attempts, not in the least. The more people who came through that door uninvited, the more shadows he could collect and the more zombies he could create. He had discovered a great many things about shadows and darkness as he trained. For example, he could create alternate dimensions within them. They took a good deal of chakra and control to create, but the result was a small spherical ball of darkness with an extremely large storage capacity. He had prepared a good deal of these storage shadows and fused them into the pockets of his trench coat. He had packed the shadows with a large amount of kunai and kunai with explosive tags attached to them. He could release a set amount of them at any time, the result being that they would fly out of the shadow at high speeds. He really enjoyed lifting up one side of the coat and releasing a bunch of kunai at his opponents. They never saw it coming since, from their perspective, the weapons came flying out of nowhere, and because of that surprise factor, it had a very good accuracy rate. He could also reach into the shadow and pull out kunai in as many numbers as he wanted. Some of the shadows held stored rations, ninja wire, normal explosive tags, paper and ink for seals or messages, blood replenishing and soldier pills, and miscellaneous items such as books and scrolls for when he got bored. He didn't carry any pouches or bags as a result. He also had one of the storage shadows compressed and hidden in the right sleeve of his long-sleeve shirt. This one only carried one item, his battle axe. With it stored there, he could just stretch his arm in a sudden motion and will it to appear, and it would appear in his hand. Best part of it all was that he didn't need to bite his fingers to release any seals like most ninja did. He had also discovered a rather interesting feature: the fact that there were other worlds. Apparently all darkness was connected, existing as one single thing. This darkness was what connected the various worlds to each other, and he could use his abilities to travel there if he wanted. He decided to leave other worlds alone though. For one thing, he would be sent to one world at random and who knows what could happen. He could end up in a world where the people breathed something other than oxygen, for example, or he could show up in a world that was completely uninhabitable. Even if he found a world that was suited for human life, he would have no sure way of getting back. He would just be tossed into the ether again, and God only knows where he would end up. So as good as a killing spree in another world to vent frustration sounded, he decided to give the whole thing a miss. Besides, if worst came to worst and he ended up captured or defeated, then he could use that as an ever-present escape route. It was wise to always be prepared. As the weeks and months passed and Naruto's strength grew, fewer and fewer people were both brave and stupid enough to try and hurt him. He said that he was happy about that to the Sandaime, but he really hated that. If people stopped coming for him, he couldn't acquire new shadows without drawing in unwanted attention. The last thing he wanted was for people to find out about his budding army of the undead. Before they outnumbered the villagers at least, after that who cared? Speaking of the zombies, they were about 50 in number now. About 30 of them were warriors, soldiers meant for combat like the first zombie was. Of the rest, they were all made special. They were like the normal zombies, but they were trapped in portraits. They could leave these portraits at will and could also travel between other frames that were made the same way. They could be used as a warning system and a defense, since no one ever expects enemies to come out of a damn painting, do they? Since he always carried a picture frame with him, he could always be aware of important events since they would warn him immediately. This frame was small, about the size of a pocket watch, but he wasn't really worried about the visual on it since he could hear the zombie in it just fine. There were only 2 zombies not directly made for combat. The first was zombie number 21. This one he made for recon outside of his home. It ended up as a mixture between a man and a bat. Since zombie number 21 was rather long for someone he actually had conversations with, he just named the guy Hilden. The other zombie was not made for either combat nor recon or any other purpose in battle. Rather, this one was made for around the housework. She was the only female zombie, and as a result he tried to at least make her look good. She was of medium height and slender build. She had red eyes and bright blue hair. She was rather quiet, but very loyal and obedient. She basically took the position of maid since the other zombies couldn't cook or clean to save their lives, while this zombie had a good talent for it. He decided to name her Ray. She also knew some hand-to-hand combat in case the house was ever intruded upon, and she found them before he did. 1. He still had to deal with the new problem of people fearing him. It was good. Don't get me wrong, but now there were very few, if any, new shadow donors. He could always abduct the villagers, but that would be a rather high-profile action. There was already an investigation as to what happened to the 50 or so people that had already vanished, not that they would ever find anything. He made his decision on what to do and approached the Sandaime with it. Despite the fact that he hated the buzzard, he still needed his permission and knew just how to play the man like a harp. The main issue was getting him to agree to let him leave the village. The Sandaime had already given him several basic manuals and guides for the ninja business, so he used the need for an escape from the hatred as the main excuse. He posed it as a training trip. He would stay at a cave near the village and train there for a year. It would act as survival training in addition to whatever work he got in on his skills. At least that was what he told the man. Coaxing people to do what you want was a subtle art. He didn't approach his request directly, for one thing. He slowly built up to it over the conversation. The subtle yet fake flattery in his words and tone, the innocent and abused mentality he portrayed, all of it was to convince the bastard to let him do what he wanted. Before long, the man agreed, and while he thanked the man politely, he was making fun of the bastard in his thoughts. The old man only had one last issue to raise. You know, Naruto-kun, if you leave the village for a year, you will have to enter the academy a year late. Naruto looked at the aged leader and gave an enormous fake smile. I know, Aji-san, but the training I get done will make up for it. Well, if you're sure then. I am Ji-san. See you later. The boy shuddered in his mind. He hated acting like that, but he had to maintain his facade until he became a genin at least. Then he could let a bit more bloodlust show. A year away from Konoha was just what he needed. Sure, he would be watched, but whatever the man tried could be bypassed without too much trouble. He would leave a variation of the Kagebunshin behind to fool the crystal ball and the ANBU that would probably check up on him at least once a week. He packed a map of the elemental countries and in his bag and sealed a large freezer into a scroll as he prepared to leave the village. He wasn't planning on staying anywhere near Konoha. He had shadows to collect, bodies to prepare, secrets to sell, and most importantly, people to find. He needed people better suited to do certain jobs than he was, and he had several things to find for his plans to be a success. One thing at a time, one thing at a time. He had patience after all. He could wait a few years for his plans to work. Naruto tested and increased his abilities, and also increased the size of the undead army. Since people stopped coming to visit him, he managed to convince the Sandaime to let him take a 1-year-long training trip in the forest outside of Konoha. We left off with him packing for the trip. Konohagakure, the demon house, as the locals call it at least. Naruto was preparing to leave for his 1-year training trip. At least that's what everyone thought he was leaving on. The real truth was a bit less pleasant for Konoha. He had more or less everything he needed. Food, weaponry, a few hundred scrolls and books on the ninja arts that he had not read yet recently filched from the areas of the library people weren't normally allowed into, all disguised as lower-level techniques via genjutsu. Zombie picture frame, check. Map of the elemental countries, check. A large freezer sealed within scroll to reserve any powerful bodies he happened to collect, check. Immense power, check. Hatred for most human beings, check. Okay, he was all set to go. As he prepared to go, he gave some last-minute instructions to Rei, who was to keep things organized while he was gone. Basically keep the place clean, repair any damage since the building was still rather decrepit. Send a picture zombie his way should anything go wrong, and wear that French-made outfit more often. He made several seals on the inside of the gate as he left the property, sealing in the place in a near-impenetrable sphere of energy. Zombies didn't need to eat or drink, so no supplies were needed to be left behind, and he didn't really want anyone going into his house when he wasn't there. His leaving Konoha wasn't that much of an event. He agreed with the Sandaime that he should leave in secret, so the old man cast a small illusion on him so that he looked like someone else so that he could just walk out without any fuss from the civilians and gate guards, not that he needed to, but the Sandaime still believed that his skills were low genin level at best, a misconception that Naruto readily encouraged. After all, the most deadly enemy is the one that you overlook. Within 2 hours of leaving Konoha, he had reached the cave that he told the Sandaime that he would be staying at for the next year. It was actually a pretty good-sized hole in the rock, a bit bigger than he thought it was. He put down most of the scrolls and books and removed the genjutsu over himself, and replaced it with one of his own, which covered the cave area. This was to fool the Sandaime's crystal ball into thinking everything was normal. He would need something a little more elaborate for the living eyes and ears that would be watching him at the Hokage's behest. He had been wanting to try this out for a while actually. He turned and faced his own shadow, a deep gray against the stone, and raised his hand toward it, fingers spread. He said only 2 words, "Come forth," and a black hand rose from the center of the shadow. The hand pushed against the floor, and before long an entire person emerged from Naruto's shadow, which vanished as soon as the creature fully emerged. This being looked exactly like Naruto. The only difference was that his entire body was pitch black and his eyes and mouth shone bright white against that darkness. This being was Naruto's shadow. It was mentally much weaker than its master, but it was extremely stronger physically as well as amorphous and immortal. All he had to do was give it orders, and the shadow would obey them to the best of its abilities. His orders were simple: take my form exactly and train here until I return. Read the books and scrolls I leave for you and do not do anything suspicious. Do you understand? The creature nodded and Naruto was pleased. The shadow would act just like a Kagebunshin. He would learn what it did as he went to sleep each night. There was only one detail to take care of first. Naruto went to the mouth of the cave and looked out into the sunlight of the dawn just peeking out from the horizon. He carefully stuck the tip of his right little finger into the light and smiled as it didn't dissolve. Apparently he could separate himself from his shadow and not be harmed by the sun. He had separated from his shadow before and practiced all sorts of moves with it. With them both working together, they were a powerful team. But Naruto hadn't dared to reveal himself to the sun without a shadow until now, and he found that his fears were unfounded. He watched as the shadow's color changed until he was looking at an exact copy of himself. He nodded to the shadow and left the cave, heading into the forest. He knew his way around Konoha's forests rather well from his sneaking about at night, so he knew right where to go to begin his search. away from Konoha and to the north, in the direction of Iwagakure. He walked into a tree's shadow and closed his eyes. He mumbled under his breath, Kagehoku, shadow walk, and vanished into the darkness, sinking into the shadow beneath him. When he emerged from that darkness, he was near the border to Tsuchi no Kuni. He really loved the Kagehoku. He could transport from one shadow to another anywhere in the world in a moment as long as he had been there before by more normal means. He had never been out of Hai no Kuni, so he had to do with the border instead. He crossed the border and made his way into Tsuchi no Kuni, Kyubi's ancestral home, the enemies of Konoha, and if his information was right, the location of the den of the esteemed Dr. Hogback. 1 week later, Naruto was staying in a small yet comfortable hotel about 50 miles in from the border. So far he had no luck locating Hogback, but it was to be expected. Tsuchi no Kuni was a big place, and graced by half a dozen mountain chains, and Hogback's hideaway could be almost anywhere in it. The only places he could be sure Hogback wasn't was within 20 miles of the borders and within 50 miles of Iwagakure no Sato. Those places were heavily guarded by IWA Nin. Aside from those locations, Hogback could be almost anywhere in the country, though he probably wasn't in any town or city. After a night of thinking, he came to the conclusion that Hogback's most likely position was in the mountains somewhere, probably near a place where they had a large graveyard, so that he could continue his exploration of the human body's mysteries. Naruto unrolled a newly stolen map of Tsuchi no Kuni that showed every last town and known settlement, and was rather dismayed at what he found. Apparently there were at least a dozen villages that fit the bill in each mountain chain, and if he was right, Hogback and Absalom could be in a hidden place anywhere within 5 miles of any of them, which was probably heavily defended. He knew finding any of Moriya's old compatriots would be difficult, but come on. Eventually Naruto decided that he really had no choice but to either search each and every one of the places he could be, over 50 villages and the lands surrounding them, or he could develop some method to search every place at once. He ground his teeth in frustration. If it was this hard to find Hogback and Absalom, who were thankfully traveling together since Absalom needed the doctor to replace his aging body parts with new ones every so often, then it would be almost impossible to locate Perona, who didn't even have a physical form. Wait a second, he thought. Absalom needs Hogback to replace his aging body parts every few years. Of course, Absalom's body is composed of mostly animal parts, mostly predators. If any of the villages listed have a large population of dangerous predators, especially ones that may have shrunk noticeably, then that would probably be the place. He eagerly looked at the map again, taking out a book of Iwa's natural wildlife. There were unique animals and plants in every country, so he had bought such books in case he found one. He checked each place in the book's index, looking for the most dangerous and powerful animals near each of them, especially ones that have experienced a declination of population over the last few years. He found some good news and some bad news when the search was complete. He had managed to narrow down the likely possibilities from over 50 to below 10, 7 to be exact, but those 7 were equally likely to be the place, and they were all very far apart. He had no real choice but to check each village individually. As most people from the Nara clan would say, Mendokus. 3 days later, 40 miles from last town, Naruto was in his hotel room, grinning like a madman. Why was he so happy? One would ask. The answer would be that he had found an extremely useful piece of information. IWA had a Jinchuriki of its own. Mind you, her abilities were not really meant for combat, but he didn't really care about that. Her abilities were in the way of recon over an extremely wide area, such as an entire country. If he could get her on his side, then he could find Hogback and Absalom within a few hours. She was also supposed to be monstrously talented at Jinjutsu. There were only 2 problems with that. The first was that because IWA was horrible to her, as it was for all Jinchuriki, she was a rather meek and easily intimidated individual. This was a bit of a problem because he liked people to be able to think for themselves. It would also make her extremely distrusting of anyone, especially people she had never met before. The second was that though IWA was extremely abusive of her, it was still protective as all hell when it came to her. It would be difficult to get her to come to his side, extremely difficult, and just as difficult to steal her away. If he succeeded, he would have to vanish from the country, and quickly, since the entire country would be swarming with ninja looking for her and, more importantly, him. He would have to observe the girl for a while and find a good way to either deceive or coerce her into accepting his offer to come with him. He looked at a picture of the girl that he had taken from the hitman he had beaten almost to death for the information on the Jinchuriki. He had heard him mention to a friend that he was hired to kill her and took action. He killed the fool once he had finished talking. The girl wore small square glasses and had short red-brown hair, very plain-looking, and was supposedly extremely smart though shy. Rather bookish too, she was supposed to be 15 years old. He looked at the girl's name before destroying the dossier. He muttered to himself, Kikukawa, Yukino, Jinchuriki of the Rokubi no Kabayaju, memorizing the name and picture. He had a new target. 2 weeks later, outside of Iwagakure. Naruto was holed up in a decent-sized cave about 1.5 miles outside of Iwa. He had been spying on the local Jinchuriki Yukino for the last 2 days, trying to learn about her fears, her preferences, how she fought, and everything he could. The more he could appeal to her when they met, the more likely it was that she would come with him. So far he had learned quite a bit. She was tremendously powerful in Genjutsu, stronger than most Kages. The only people that would be able to come anywhere close to matching her in Genjutsu would be Uchiha Itachi, and that chick in Konoha that could make Genjutsu real before Yuhi Kurenai sealed her powers away. Her illusions were as unbreakable and traumatizing as the Tsukuyami. He knew that if he was caught in one of her illusions, it would be really bad. The only bit about that was that she was too meek and shy to use her Genjutsu abilities against those that would harm her. He really couldn't figure that one out. Though she was possibly the strongest Genjutsu master in centuries, maybe ever, she was low Jounin level in everything else. He had found out about a decent bit of her life too. She was extremely introverted and didn't like confrontation, which was to be expected given her abandoned by parent status and was listed as a Tokubetsu Jounin in Iwa's books. The only reason someone hadn't killed her by now was because of her one and only friend, Suzushiro Haruka. Unlike her friend Yukino, she was loud and aggressive, and fiercely protective of her friend. As a result, the blonde Jounin was considered demonically tainted by her peers. After she befriended Yukino, she quickly became her only friend. He also noticed that Haruka wasn't incredibly loyal to Iwa either. He knew that if he was going to convert Yukino, Haruka was the key to it. If he could rope Haruka into going with the idea, then the Jinchuriki would follow. This was only cemented when he learned one crucial fact about the shy Jinchuriki that no one, not even her friend, knew. The fact that Kikukawa Yukino was head over heels for Suzushiro Haruka. He could slightly understand that. After all, the blonde Jounin was the only one who ever helped her in the least. He knew that if he could get Haruka on his side somehow, then the Jinchuriki would remain loyal. It was one more person than he intended to carry off, but it was worth it. The only question was how to use Yukino's love to his best advantage. He had gotten his chance a week later, the day that Suzushiro Haruka was killed. It was supposedly a training accident. That was the story spread, but Naruto knew the truth. What was supposedly a friendly spar between co-workers was actually a well-thought-out assassination by a Jinchuriki hater to redeem the tainted one's soul. When Yukino found out, she went into a depressive slump and retreated to her home, and the only people that had seen her since was the mob that attacked her home the next day to remove the taint once and for all. Yukino, in her depressed state, was apparently more willing to shatter minds with her illusions than her normal self was, judging by the new additions to the local asylum. Naruto thought of a way to bring both Yukino and Haruka to his side and shatter their frail loyalties to Iwa in one fell swoop. He grinned as he snuck into the Jinchuriki's apartment one day after the accident. The place was a lot dirtier and unkempt than it normally was. As he looked around the interior, he could hear a slight crying from a nearby room. He made sure that he stayed quiet as he neared the room. The last thing he wanted was for her to attack him. He wasn't all that sure he could win against her if she did. He found her crying her eyes out, muttering things such as, "Why, Haruka? Why did you leave me?" and other such things. He entered the room without a sound and used the shadows to cloak himself from sight as he spoke to her. Yukino had spent the last day and a half in utter depression. Her best friend, her only friend, the love of her life, even though she knew that she would never return her feelings, was gone, killed by accident. She couldn't believe that life could be so unfair. She was utterly consumed by despair and hopelessness. She was completely shocked when she heard a voice from nowhere whispered into her ear. "Why are you crying?" the voice asked her. Her sadness turned to anger at the voice. Who was this person to wonder why she was crying? Wasn't it obvious? She growled to the voice, "Why do you think? She's gone. My Haruka-chan is gone. She left me behind, just like everyone else. How can I go one without her? She was the only reason I had left for living. Her voice was loud and harsh at first, but settled into a whimper as the sentence ended. The voice returned, "What would you do if I said that I could give Haruka back to you?" She looked around for the voice in supreme rage. How dare this person, this thing, toy with her emotions, toy with her love for Haruka? She would find whoever it was and tear their mind asunder, and she told the voice as such. The voice returned, filled with mirth. "Why would you destroy your one chance to have Haruka return to you? I do not joke. Resurrection is within my abilities. Simply ask me to and I will return Suzushiro Haruka to you, just as she was before she was assassinated." Yukino was stunned. Haruka was assassinated? Murdered? She couldn't believe it. She asked the voice, her own voice filled with uncharacteristic rage. "Who did it? Who took Haruka-chan away from me? Why would they hurt her? When she was so beautiful, so perfect." The voice returned once more, "She was killed because of her association with you. It was done on the orders of the Tsuchikage. Why do you think someone who Haruka had never talked to before challenged her to a match and used an abnormally long kunai that could easily strike an accidentally fatal blow that he had never been seen using before? It was planned by your village. It was a Wagakure itself that took Haruka from you. No one else is to blame." Yukino was once more distraught. She picked up a knife and yelled with fresh tears staining her eyes, "Haruka-chan was killed because of me. It's my fault she's dead." She drove the knife toward her chest, but a tendril of shadow struck the knife from her hand. The voice returned, "It is not your fault Haruka is dead. It is the Wagakure's fault. Even so, it does not matter as I can bring your Haruka back to you, if you want me to." Yukino looked up to where she thought the voice was coming from, which was about 10 feet to the right of where Naruto actually was, and said, "And what would you want in return if you were able to do so?" "Nothing comes for free. I know that much." Though she didn't know it, Naruto smiled at that. Even depressed to borderline insanity, she was still sharp as a razor. The voice returned and whispered to her, "You are correct. There is a catch, but it is insignificant to what you would gain in return. In exchange for your Haruka's return, I only ask for your loyalty, your obedience to my commands. You will leave IWA with me, and your Haruka-chan may come as well if you want. I can assure you that if you come with me, you will one day have your revenge on a Wagakure no Sato." Yukino considered it for a long while. If she left IWA, then there would be no one to defend her. But then again, IWA had hurt her more than anyone else ever had or ever could. She decided to agree to the deal. She didn't know what would happen, but it would definitely be better than staying here. She spoke and Naruto smiled when he heard her reply when she said, "You have a deal." Yukino looked around and said, "I have a question though. Just who are you?" A small figure stepped from the shadows and she jumped when it did. She didn't detect anything from there. She didn't hear any heartbeat or its footsteps. She didn't sense any chakra until the figure moved either. Her jaw dropped when the figure was revealed to be a boy no more than 7 or 8 years old. He said to her, "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Now then let's get going. We'll have to get Haruka's body back for this to work." He walked out the door with the bookish Jinchuriki behind him, still astounded at both the boy's age and the authority he apparently had. 1 hour later, Genjutsu hidden cave 40 miles from IWA. They were hiding out in one of Naruto's portable labs, prepping for the resurrection. Haruka's nude form was on a metal table and Naruto had put on a lab coat, mask and gloves, and was cleaning a bunch of scientific/medical instruments. Yukino just sat in the corner, amazed at what had happened in the last 2 hours for her. Flashback no jutsu. Naruto and Yukino had gotten to the morgue in one piece. It was about 9 at night, so no one saw them. He had asked her about the security around the morgue since a hidden village's morgue was always well defended. Dead ninja bodies were flesh-colored gold nowadays. The techniques that could be developed and the jutsu and bloodline stolen could do tremendous damage to a ninja village if their morgue was successfully raided. As a result, the only places that were more defended than the morgue was the local Kage's residence, the reservoir in Sunagakure, and any jutsu libraries in the village. Aside from those places, the morgue was the most well-defended place. Yukino had told him what she knew. Since the Third Ninja War, the number of high-quality shinobi was lowered by a lot and IWA was still dealing with the damage. As a result, there were only 10 high Chunin level ninja guarding the place from the inside, and the 5 doctors that held the night shift were all high Chunin to low Jounin level shinobi. Quite a bit of security for a 3-story, completely square building, especially considering the fact that there were alarms linked to every other door and cameras everywhere. One slip-up and half the ninja population of the village would be raining upon them like bats from hell. Naruto, though, had a simple solution to alarms, cameras, and reinforcements already thought up. He held his hands in front of him, palms facing each other about 6 inches apart. Shadows began to coalesce between his hands, forming a small sphere. He showed the ball to Yukino and explained. This sphere, he began, will envelop a large space and immensely speed up time inside of it. An hour in there becomes a minute out here, you see? She nodded and he continued. This solves the problem of reinforcements, but the cameras, alarms, and other non-human defenses in there will be gone too, since everything electronic will short out upon contact with the sphere. The stuff comes back online when the sphere is gone though. Lightning jutsu can't be used in here either. They just don't work and no one can get in or out without my help. The plan is this. I put this little guy around the building and we storm the place. We get the soon-to-be not late Haruka's body, and we hightail it out of here. Sound good? Before she could nod, he pressed the sphere between his palms. A second later, he let it go and the darkness spread from his hands, enveloping the morgue and everything within 20 feet of the building, the 2 of them included. According to Yukino, there were 4 guards inside the entrance hall, so he went in prepared for them. A very small ball of solidified shadow formed on the tips of the first 4 fingers on his right hand. She asked what those were for, and he looked at her, grinned, and showed her his fingers one by one. As each sphere became visible to her, he said, 1 dead ninja, 2 dead ninja, 3 dead ninja, 4. Then he turned to the door, said beneath his breath, ding ding, round 1. Before he kicked the door down and flicked his hand toward the 4 ninja that rushed them the moment the door opened. The 4 balls of condensed darkness rushed from his hand and pierced through the chests of the 4, each appearing to be nothing but a line that stretched from his hand and went through his opponents before disappearing into the wall. The 4 ninja fell without a sound, and 4 small craters decorated the wall around the receptionist, who was looking frail and helpless. That was to be expected since she was the only civilian in the building. He approached the woman and casually leaned against the counter, a smile on his face, and asked her, "Where would I look to find the body of the late Suzushiro Haruka?" Like he didn't just kill 4 people like it was nothing. She shakily pointed to a chart which listed in which freezer a body was in, depending on what letter their name started with. There was a separate freezer for the unidentified. The S's were in freezer 5. He looked at the terrified secretary and said, "Thank you," before a shadow came from the ceiling, wrapped around her neck, and hoisted her up. He shrugged at the hanging secretary, said, "Nothing personal," and walked toward the freezer section. They encountered 2 more Chunin on their way to the freezer in question who made the bad move of attempting to use Raitun Jutsu. Given the treaty between Kumo and IWA during the war, IWA ninja picked up a few lightning techniques and vice versa. Since Doton Jutsu were too wide-range to use here, they went to the only thing they knew that would work in any other circumstance. Naruto thought the look on their faces was priceless when they looked at their hands in shock when their jutsu didn't work. Their heads were cut off from tendrils of darkness that originated from the natural shadows of the walls before they knew what had happened. When they got to the freezer, Naruto cut off the lock with a small blade of shadow that extended from his fingers and found a large room with a bunch of square cubicles lining a wall. He looked to Yukino and said, "You keep watch." She nodded and stood a small way back from the door as Naruto cut the lock off of one cubicle, opened it, and checked the tag on the toe of the body inside before moving to the next one. On the 7th one, he checked the tag, smiled, and said, "We have a winner," as he rolled out the steel sheet that the body rested on. He called to Yukino, who came quickly, and told her to pick up the body and follow him, which she did, albeit with some difficulty. Naruto led them to a shadow in the corner and grabbed her arm. He muttered under his breath, "Kagehoko," just as 4 Chunin and 3 Jounin-level doctors rushed inside the room. A moment and a whirl of nausea later, and they were in a strange cave. Naruto took a scroll from his coat and told her to put a genjutsu over the cave mouth. By the time she was done, he had unsealed a small building and carried the body inside. And then they were where they were now. Flashback no Jutsu Kai. Naruto, after dressing in normal scientific/medical clothing, removed the white blanket covering Haruka from view. The moment he did, Yukino had a massive, near-debilitating nosebleed. Modest C-cup, not too bad by anyone's standards. Bright blue eyes, currently closed, and a full head of blonde curls. The only thing marring her body was the thin yet extremely deep wound in her side. Naruto went through a few hand seals for an examination jutsu and put his hand over her chest. He quickly copped a feel when Yukino was cleaning the blood off of her upper lip, and she didn't notice at all. After a second or two, he took his hand away and whistled. Damn! Whoever did this knew what they were doing. He did an awesome job. One stab, clean, right between the ribs and right through the heart. I couldn't have done it better myself. Okay, this is going to be more work than I thought. We are going to need a transplant. Yukino looked at the diminutive blonde and asked, Transplant? I thought you were going to resurrect her. Naruto pulled off his gloves and looked at the girl like she just said the moon was made out of cheese and said, Yes, but I think you don't want her resurrected into a body that has been fatally wounded. I need to fix up the wound that killed her before I do it or she'll just die again. Her heart is beyond repair. Everything else is easily mended. As a result, I will need to do a transplant. Now, if you'll excuse me. He walked outside of the small building and she reluctantly followed him outside, taking one more look at the body of Haruka. Naruto had taken a scroll from the coat he left inside the portable lab and unsealed a large freezer. It was as big as the laboratory easily. He opened the door and motioned for her to follow him inside, which she did. She wasn't prepared for what was inside. There was the massive cold, of course. It was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit inside the freezer, but there were at least 50 bodies inside, hanging from meat hooks, men and women, young and old. He looked at her and just asked, What's her blood type? Yukino was shocked for a moment but got a hold of herself and answered, Type AB. He nodded and went through the bodies, eventually choosing a rather busty female that had taken a rather nasty fall, given the angle of her neck. He took out a kunai and without missing a beat cut through the skin of her chest, revealing the breastbone. He charged his chakra into the blade and cut through the bone like butter. He carefully spread the two halves of bone and reached in, taking hold of the necessary organ, and with the knife cut each of the connecting veins and arteries that led to the organ. He pulled out a perfectly functional, if a bit cold, human heart and walked out, Yukino following. He sealed up the freezer and went back inside the lab. He prevented his fellow Jinchuriki from entering though. He needed a sterile environment. As a result, Yukino was stuck sitting outside the door listening to the sound of flesh and bone parting, the clinking of metal instruments and the scent of cold blood for about an hour before the door opened again and her love's mysterious savior stepped out again, medical smock covered in blood. He motioned for her to come in, which she eagerly did. The room was just as it had been before, only there was more blood and a brand new scar on Haruka's chest. The wound that killed her was also gone. There was a lot of blood on the instruments, especially the scalpel. There was also a pierced heart in a jar. She looked at him and asked, How did she recover so quickly? There should still be stitches, and the wound should be open. He looked at her and said, Demonic chakra, one of the best healing agents there is. She looked at him in shock and asked, How do you have access to demonic chakra? Only a bijou could use it. He looked at her again and said only one thing, a bijou or a Jinchuriki. She looked at him open-mouthed. She shakily asked, Jay, just who are you? He looked at the completely astonished girl and said, Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Kitsune. Pleased to meet you. The already astounded girl almost went into shock. Not only a Jinchuriki but the container of Kyubi, the strongest of the 9, no wonder he is so strong, she thought. He knelt by the body and said, Now we begin the resurrection. He began a low chant in a language she did not know. It was twisting and writhing. She couldn't explain it. About 2 hours later, he was still chanting. She gathered up the courage and asked, Is this really necessary? He stopped his chant and looked at the girl before standing up and saying, No, not really. She was surprised by this and couldn't come up with a response. He smirked and said, Okay, enough joking around. Time for the real thing. He took a deep breath and reached down and touched her shadow, his hand sliding into it as though it were water. He thought the process to himself as he worked. The only thing you need for a human is a body and soul. The body is already supplied in this case. All we need now is her soul. What most people don't know is that the shadow and the soul are connected. This is why a zombie would die if the original owner of its shadow died before I put my seal on it. The process of zombification is simply putting a powerful shadow and therefore a powerful soul into a powerful body, creating an even greater warrior than the two would be on their own given a lower quality counterpart. Resurrection, though, is different from zombification, since I need a specific shadow to go with the now functional body. When a person dies, their soul, their memories and feelings, separate from the shadow and move on. The soul still leaves traces on the shadow, though that gradually vanish as time goes on. A resurrection of a person only a day or two old is easy. After a week has gone by, though, the soul is irretrievable. The body has to be functional too. Otherwise the person would just die again. She is only a day or two dead, so it shouldn't be too hard. There. The moment he found the remnants, he quickly followed the trail to the soul, wherever it was. He slowly pulled it out of the shadow's darkness. A small rainbow-colored orb. There's a good girl. He muttered to himself, and he slowly pressed the orb into the girl's chest and waited. A few moments later her eyes flew open, and she took in a ragged breath like a person who was borderline drowning. She looked around wildly, shocked and confused. Yukino was overjoyed. She yelled out, "Haruka-chan!" and rushed forward, but stopped when Naruto knocked out the newly revived Haruka with a chop to the neck. Yukino was surprised and instantly went on guard. He looked up at her and said, "Relax. I didn't hurt her. Her soul still needs to acclimatize to being alive again, so she needs to sleep for at least a day. If she gets too excited before then, it could shatter the feeble link between body and soul and kill her again. Anyway, I did as I promised. I resurrected your friend. Now for you to hold up your end of the bargain." She was rather nervous at the thought of what the strange boy would ask her to do, but was surprised at what he asked. He gave her a picture of a very strange-looking man and said, "I need you to find him. Locate Dr. James Hogback." Summary of the last chapter. Naruto infiltrated Tsuchi no Kuni in search of Dr. Hogback and Absalom. He had no luck finding them, but learned that a Wagakure had its own Jinchuriki who was a master of Jinjutsu and had abilities to scout out an entire country. Enlisting the meek Jinchuriki Kikukawa Yukino by resurrecting her only friend and secret crush, the Jounin Suzushiro Haruka, he has obtained 2 powerful followers as well as a means to locate the elusive doctor, and now the chapter begins. Genjutsu Hidden Cave. Naruto handed Yukino a picture that he had gotten from Kyubi's memories of what Hogback probably looked like. It was really a genjutsu on a piece of cardboard, but that wasn't really important. Yukino examined the picture. The man was of decent height and broad. His face was rather memorable. Long, pointed ears, vampire-like fangs, and he had a very long and pointed nose. His lips were a dark shade of purple for some reason, and he wore completely black. Circular glasses like the Aburame clan were prone to do that completely covered his eyes. His hair was shoulder length, lank and pitch black, and he had a spiraling tattoo on his left shoulder. His forehead was very large due to balding at some point in his life. He wore some sort of black fur clothing over his back, a fishnet shirt and normal-looking black pants. He also wore rubber gloves that reached his forearms and boots that went to mid-shin. Yukino looked at the boy and told him that it shouldn't be too hard to find him if he was in Tsuchi no Kuni. He nodded and gave her a list of the points where he most likely was. She took the list and got to work. Naruto watched in surprise at Yukino's abilities. She closed her eyes and murmured something under her breath, and a hexagonal mirror appeared in front of her from nothing. As he watched, large green tendrils of plant-like material emerged from the ground. There were probably 1 to 2 dozen of them, and each of them sprouted a few dozen strange pod-like seeds that broke away from the main plant and floated in mid-air. Before long there were a few thousand of them throughout the cave. He examined one of the seeds quickly. Though the plant was biological, it had a strangely mechanical eye like a camera lens in the middle of the broader side. This was before the thousands of seeds rushed through the cave opening. He looked toward Yukino and saw that the mirror she was looking at from before had turned into more. There were about 2 dozen identical mirrors around Yukino, which she moved in front of them both, the sides easily fitting together to make a single gigantic faceted mirror. Each facet had a different image upon it, and they changed at a rapid pace. She told him that each seed had a built-in genjutsu that allowed it to become invisible to normal people. He watched the multifaceted mirror in complete shock as each view moved at incredible speeds, moving where Yukino wanted them to go. The view from it all quickly made him a bit sick and he looked away. Yukino had obviously had a lot of practice at this since she wasn't affected at all. He was absolutely amazed. He had no idea that a technique like this existed. The possibilities completely shocked him. They were endless. Entire countries could be watched all at once. Escape from Yukino's network was almost impossible. If it was in her range, which was amazingly broad, she would be able to find it within a few minutes. Before long, the Great Mirror showed a complete view of every major event in the country. There was a riot in a smaller town because of a corrupt governor. The daimyo was just waking up with a woman that was not his wife. Iwa was swarming with ninja, sending them out in droves. Rare animals fed upon certain plants that they liked in the mountains. It was simply too much for the boy to believe, and if he wasn't watching it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it. Inside of his mind, Kyubi was just as amazed. She had no idea that the Rokubi was strong or smart enough to come up with something like this. It was 1 hour of searching later before they found him. Dr. James Hogback, greatest doctor of his time and one of the 2 greatest medics alive, the other being Tsunade herself. He was currently drinking a cup of tea on a mountain ledge, apparently enjoying the sunrise until one looked at the town below. They were having a mass burial. 10 men dead due to a building collapsing. He put down the teacup and wrote something down on a piece of paper before walking straight through the mountainside, disappearing from sight. Naruto asked Yukino where that was. Apparently it was a small mountain town called Bubyuk in the Fujino Mountains. He inwardly cringed. That was about 10 miles away from one of the towns he had marked. He thought more about how he had walked through a mountain though. He came upon the solution after a minute or two. It must have been Absalom. He had the ability to make anything invisible, as long as he was able to touch it. Hiding a cave entrance would have been too simple for him. He told Yukino that they would wait for 1 day so that Haruka could get her bearings and then they would go. Yukino nodded and marked the invisible cave's location on the map before letting the mirrors disappear, the seeds with them. The massive plant stalks sank back into the ground as Naruto laid out a tent for each of them before going to bed. Raiding a well-defended building, heart transplant surgery, and bringing back the dead really takes it out of a guy. After a few moments, Yukino went to sleep too in the other tent, hardly believing that any of this was real. 9 hours later. Naruto woke up exactly 9 hours later. It was currently 10 a.m. He quickly got up and sealed up the tent, then went over to wake up Yukino. A minute or so of shaking her shoulder later and he got bored and nailed her with a low-powered suetun. Mizurappa. She woke up in a flash. He silently handed her a towel and she glared at him as she took it. Her mind was a little out of order. She had the weirdest dream where Haruka died and a small child agreed to resurrect her if she swore loyalty to him, which she did, and they raided the morgue for Haruka's body and he brought her back to life right in front of her. She had abandoned her home, if she could call it that. Then she looked around the cave and realized that her dream wasn't a dream and glared at the boy who handed her a towel after soaking her in water. She got up and dried off to the best of her ability as Naruto sealed up the tent that he had lent her. She put her glasses back on after drying her face and looked at the boy, actually studying him. He was young, no more than 8 or 9 years old at most. He wore a shirt of a black rubber material and had durable pants. He wore standard-issue shinobi sandals and had a large trench coat. He didn't put his arms in the sleeves but rather wore it like a cloak, with his hands and arms free inside of it. He had the top 2 buttons done and the collar was flipped up, covering his face from the sides and back. He wore leather gloves that reached mid-forearm and a black hat of a strange design. It was cylindrical and went up 3 inches from the brim and was pitch black. Its brim was wide and slightly glossed so that the reflection from any light would make it hard to look him in the face. The entire thing was apparently designed to be difficult to recognize his features. She noticed one thing about him that had slipped her notice before. He didn't have a shadow. The thing just wasn't there. His size combined with what he had shown her forced her to ask a question. How did you get all of those people into that freezer? Where did you get them, and how did you get them onto those hooks? He turned to look at her and said, as for where I got them, well, I have been collecting them as I traveled through Tsuchi no Kuni. 2 or 3 from each town and anyone I met on the road. I studied them for blood type, any possible diseases, Kekii Genkai or anything else that made them special. As for how I got them from place to place, well, without any obvious movement from him, A large black claw emerged from the darkness of the deeper areas of the cave. Well, I have a lot of hands. Now come on, we have to go get your friend. He walked on toward the portable laboratory, Yukino hurrying to follow him. He may be small, but that little bastard was quick. He opened the door and walked inside, Yukino following him as he approached the still sleeping Haruka. Wait, she cried. Didn't you say that if you woke her up too early she might die? Naruto looked back at his fellow Jinchuriki and said yes, but the amount of time necessary for the body and soul to acclimatize varies from person to person. She wasn't dead for very long, so the time for acclimatization shouldn't be too long. I am going to check and see if she can be safely woken up yet, and if she can't, then I will get an accurate time as to when it should be safe. Then he turned back and plunged his hand into her shadow before the bespectacled girl could say anything more. He felt around the darkness of Haruka's shadow. Well, her soul is definitely here. That's a good sign. Everything seems to be lined up correctly. Wait, there's one. A spot where the shadow and body haven't connected to the soul. Let's see now, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 spots not linked up yet. Yeah, it's definitely not safe, but the spots are minor, so it shouldn't be too long. He pulled his hand out from the shadow and opened his eyes. Yukino asked him, well, is it safe to wake her up yet? He looked at the girl and said, not yet, but it won't be too long, an hour or two at most. He looked around before walking outside. He asked the girl, hey, since we're going to be waiting for a little while, care to play a game of chess? The moment the question left his mouth and he took out a portable chess set, he knew he made a mistake judging by how Yukino's eyes lit up. Oh God, what demon have I awakened now? 2 hours and 32 chess games later. Naruto buried his head in his hands. That was absolutely embarrassing. He had lost 32 games in a damn row. Yukino was apparently a chess fanatic. He should have expected it given her bookish exterior, but now he knew rather than thought that she fit the stereotype of nerd. He looked over to Yukino, who kept asking, oh come on, one more game, it can't hurt, before he stood up and walked toward the cave mouth. Hey, where are you going? She asked him. He looked at her and said, there's a town about 5 miles away. I am going to get your friend some clothes unless you and her would prefer that she go with us completely naked. Now then, if you'll excuse me. He walked out of the Jinjutsu and sank into a shadow. He's right, she thought. The only thing Haruka-chan has to clothe her is her Hitai 8, since IWA law dictates that dead ninja be buried with them. I wonder how long he'll be? Her question was answered when he showed up barely 10 minutes later with clothing in hand. When she asked him how he had gotten to a town 5 miles away, bought the stuff and gotten back so quickly, he just replied, being able to instantaneously go wherever I have been before is awesome. Appeared about 10 feet away from the shop's front door, picked up what I wanted, and sank into the shadows right in front of the shopkeeper as I got close to the register. His face was absolutely priceless. He is probably calling the local police as we speak, but it will be cold day in hell before they find this place. Yukino was rather worried at that, and when I say worried I mean frantic. You stole that stuff? Are you crazy? We'll be listed as criminals. There will be wanted posters for us everywhere. We'll be. He just decided to interrupt her before she went too nuts and said, Yukino, think clearly for a moment. First off, I covered my features with a genjutsu before I went in, so even if wanted posters do show up, they will be looking for a middle-aged man with a pedophiliac smile, less hair than normal, and a bad case of leprosy. Even if I didn't, I doubt that there will be wanted posters put up throughout a country for a spot of shoplifting. And the only places our faces are going to be seen will be in a nice comfy spot in the IWA bingo book. We have raided a hidden village's morgue for the corpse of a powerful Jounin's body ripe with secrets. You will be listed as AB or A-class missing, mean for sure due to your skill, maybe even S-class due to your Jinchuriki status. When Haruka appears with you, she will be treated the same. I won't be on a wanted list due to my apparent age. People will just assume that I appeared as a child due to an illusion, and they will put a note in your profile that says something like, travels with an unknown shinobi of unknown power, or something like that. You already are a criminal, Yukino, face it. I doubt a few articles of stolen clothing will make your court sentence any heavier than the death penalty that you could expect from Iwagakure if you're ever caught. He waited for a moment to let that sink in before continuing. Now, let's get Haruka these clothes so that she is decent when she travels with us, and then we shall get the hell out of here. I don't want to stay in this country any longer than necessary. He continued his walk toward the lab where the sleeping Haruka still was before remembering something. He turned and tossed a kunai to the ground at Yukino's feet. Oh, by the way, since you are missing Nin now, you may want to at least keep to the standard. Yukino knelt down and took the knife as Naruto entered the building and after a moment's hesitation, slashed her idiotic, which she wore around her neck, through the middle. Naruto came out a minute later and handed her a bundle wrapped in paper. Also, I got you some new clothes since yours are in rather poor condition. I thought that it would be best if you woke up your friend and explained things to her. She will probably want to see a familiar face when she wakes up. I have examined her and it is safe to wake her. Take your time. There are only legions of IWA ninja out for our blood. After that he went and sat against the wall. Yukino, after a moment's thought, entered the laboratory. About 10 minutes later Yukino and the now awakened Haruka walked out of the lab. Haruka was looking around at everything. She was wearing normal shinobi paints taped off at the ankle, standard kunoichi sandals, and a white Chinese-style shirt. She had her noticeably slashed IWA Hitai-8 around her waist like a belt. There was a pouch full of ninja equipment at her waistline. Yukino was wearing a shirt of a tough dark material and black pants of similar design to her friends. A standard equipment pouch and kunai holder along with normal kunoichi sandals finished the outfit and she had her Hitai-8 around her neck as usual. She was guiding her friend by the hand and he heard Haruka saying, I only wish that we could get back at that fine that killed me. Fiend, Yukino corrected her friend. Naruto sealed up the lab and put the scroll in its usual place before saying, You wish for revenge. And Haruno women wish they were born with big, beautiful tits instead of the equivalent of molehills. Not everyone gets what they want, but at least your dream will come true in time. Theirs won't. Anyway, Yukino explained the situation to you? Haruka nodded, carefully eyeing the person that supposedly brought her back from the dead, and he just said, Good. Then come on. The Fujino Mountains are about 60 miles away, and the cave we are looking for is rather deep in them. He started walking toward the cave mouth, the two kunoichi hurrying to catch up. Before he left, he turned around and asked Haruka, Oh, by the way, do you want to keep this? He held up the jar with Haruka's pierced heart. When he saw Haruka turn green, he just said, Come on, it will make a nice souvenir. She slapped the jar out of his hand and it landed with a loud crack on the ground. Naruto looked at the jar and said, Geez, no one has a sense of humor anymore. Before walking on, the bookish Yukino trying to calm down her now fuming friend. 2 weeks and 80 miles later. The three were staying in a tent hidden by a genjutsu provided by Yukino about a mile outside of Bubuk. The place was a rather quaint mining town under the control of an actually legitimate governor. Not a bit of corruption in the guy. That might explain why Naruto had heard rumors of ninja being hired to kill the guy in a few days. They had also had a mass grave robbing not too long ago. They were the 10 that died in the collapsed building, proof that they weren't too far off from their goal. Yukino was currently using her abilities on a much smaller scale to try and locate the ledge she had seen the elusive hogback on 2 weeks ago. Getting there had been tough. IWA ninja were swarming everywhere you looked. It was the benefit of having an insanely obese ninja population. They had managed to escape the scrutiny of most of the groups after them, but one lucky, or not so lucky depending on how you look at it, team had stumbled upon their camp one night as Yukino was preparing a genjutsu to hide them. There were 3 of them and they were all low to mid-jounin level. The 4 of them immediately sent out a barrage of shuriken when they recognized their target. Naruto, who had just left one of the 2 tents, blocked the projectiles with a wall of shadow donated from the trees and quickly distracted them. This distraction came in the form of 6 claws emerging from each of the 4 shadows of the 4 ninja. 2 hands grabbed each ninja by the hips and held them still as the remaining 4 divided their attention to their legs. Each leg had 2 hands grab it near the knee and suddenly twist. There was a slight pop as kneecaps were removed from joints and a quiet snap as bones broke. When the 4 were incapacitated, Naruto took them all out with a kunai to the neck each. An unsealed and resealed freezer and 4 bodies on meat hooks later. The only evidence of the hunter ninja's presence was the bloodstains on the ground from the pierced jugular veins, the shiny new equipment wielded by Yukino and Haruka, and the IWA bingo book in Naruto's hand. He looked through it and after a minute or 2 found an interesting entry. He showed Yukino a picture of herself in the A-class section that had all of her known data. Naruto pointed to a small note that said, accompanied by an unknown ninja of unknown power, presumably Jounin, that hides his appearance via Jinjutsu to appear as a child. There was also a pretty fat 30,000 Ryo bounty on her head too. When she finished reading her own dossier, Naruto looked at her, smiled and said, "Told you, didn't I?" Aside from that encounter, their journey had been uneventful. Yukino got Naruto's attention when she found the place she was looking for. It was about 50 feet up the mountain, not too far from where they were now. Naruto nodded and left the tent, the two women behind him as he sealed it up. Without a second's hesitation, he walked to and started walking up the mountain, the two older women behind him. The ledge wasn't too narrow, nor was it too broad. A single person would have no difficulty standing on it, but three people were a bit much. Naruto didn't doubt that there was an easier way to get up there somehow. Naruto, after a moment's thought, slowly pushed a hand through the seemingly solid rock wall before walking through it entirely. Haruka and Yukino weren't far behind him. Naruto walked into a well-illuminated cave. There wasn't much to be said for the place really. If he didn't see Hogback here, and if it weren't for the torches on the walls, he would have said that it was uninhabited. He walked into a 10-foot-long torchlit corridor before he broke a tripwire. He looked at the broken string with a bit of apprehension. No traps went off. No alarms went off, at least no obvious ones. He decided that it must be a silent alarm, a warning system that didn't let the enemy know they were detected. He continued in, keeping watch for any traps. After traveling through a sparsely furnished living room, he finally found one of the two he was looking for. A tall man with the face of a beast, clad in a black coat and wearing an odd hat, stepped around the corner and without any preempt lifted his hand, palm facing Naruto, and growled, "Dead man's hand." A blast rocketed toward the young shadow user, which was blocked by said shadows. Not wanting to bother with Absalom any further, but not wanting to hurt him too badly, he manipulated the beast man's own shadow. A pair of hands emerged from Absalom's shadow, grabbed the beast man's ankles and pulled his legs out from under him. A few seconds later, when he was done kissing the stone floor, he pointed his hand at Naruto again. This time the hands did their work before Absalom could attack. They lifted him up and slammed him back into the ground, stunning the amalgam of man and animal. He told the two kunoichi following him to watch the knocked-out creature as he continued on. Naruto walked into the room Absalom was hiding in and found 3 doors. A bit of exploration later, and he discovered that 2 of them were the bedrooms of Absalom and Hogback, while the third was Hogback's laboratory, where he found the skilled, yet elusive doctor. He found Hogback dissecting a human corpse. There was an open coffin leaning against the wall alongside 9 others, 3 of which were also opened. Hogback didn't really react to Naruto's intrusion like he thought he would. He just looked up, put down his instruments, and said, "Hello. So why are you here and how did you find this place?" Naruto stayed silent for a moment due to mild surprise. He was expecting something more loud and frightened rather than detached calm. After a moment, Hogback reached under the table before him and pulled out a gun from his own time that had been stuck to a magnetic strip under the table. He pointed the gun at Naruto, who recognized the weapon thanks to Kyuubi's memories, cocked it, and asked Naruto the same question again. In other words, "Who are you, and how did you find this place?" Naruto smiled and said, "Well, my name is Uzumaki Naruto. I found this place because I saw you on the ledge outside and I came here to give you a very interesting offer." Hogback adjusted the gun to point right at Naruto's head and said, "Oh, and what's that? If I don't like your answer, I will have to put a hole between your eyes, you understand." Naruto nodded and just said, "In exchange for the assistance of you and Absalom, I will return to you the power and authority you had as members of Gecko Moria's 3 enigmas." Hogback almost dropped his gun in shock. How does this boy know about Moria or about Thriller Bark? No one other than the zombies on that island, and those weaklings in the forest knew what we were called either. Never mind the fact that Thriller Bark fell centuries ago, and no one except me and Absalom have lived long enough to remember the times of the Grand Line, before the Red Line fell. I must find out more. Hogback reaffirmed his hold on the gun. Naruto could have taken out the doctor by now, but he wanted the man to come along willingly. Hogback said, with clear distrust in his voice, "Really? Tell me, how does a boy know about things that are in no living record? Gecko Moria was defeated centuries ago, and Thriller Bark with him. The only living people who should know about that place are Absalom and I. How did you find out, and even more importantly, How do you plan to give us back what we lost when Thriller Bark fell? Naruto smiled and said, having access to a demon's memories is a powerful asset, Hogback-san. As for how I can give you back what you lost that day, well, he had large claws come out of the shadows around the room, shocking the doctor. I have the abilities that you required from Gecko Moria to create zombies, those abilities and more. I have already made around 50 zombies using the methods you created. I have even improved upon them. Recovering from his mild shock, Hogback asked, with a bit of suppressed hope in his voice, "Oh, is that right? Well, how have you improved upon my designs then, Naruto-san?" Naruto smiled openly then and said, well, I have made them fireproof for one thing. The second is that I have developed a way so that it is safe to kill the Shadow's original owner and not kill the zombie with him. Hogback actually dropped the gun this time, and it clattered to the floor. Impossible, he muttered. Naruto smiled and said, not so. It is like I told you, Hogback-san, I can give you back what you lost at Thriller Bark, that and more. However, though I can make zombies easily enough, I need a medical expert to assist me. You have far more experience in creating zombies than I do, so your creations will be superior to my designs. That is why I did not try to harm you. If I couldn't have found you useful, I would have killed the both of you by now to prevent word of the zombies' weakness from spreading once they become known. Now then, I trust you will agree to my deal? It is simple enough. Serve me as you served Gecko Moria. Create zombies for me to animate, it is simple enough. Hogback nodded. He knew that this was the opportunity of a dozen lifetimes he was being offered. The time he spent at Thriller Bark was the most successful time of his life. Once the Mujiwara crew defeated Moria, that all went down the drain, but now he had a chance to get it all back. Naruto just said, come on, we need to go wake up Absalom. Before he walked through the door, Hogback followed him quickly, afraid that this might be a dream. After they had woken up Absalom and he agreed to the same deal that Hogback had, the five of them sat down in the living room. Naruto and Hogback sitting in the two chairs while Absalom and the two girls leaned against the wall. Naruto started the discussion. Okay. First thing, we have to get out of Tsuchi no Kuni and fast. Absalom looked at him and said, why is that, Naruto-sama? Naruto looked at the beast man and said, well, Iwagakure is going to be hunting high and low for these two here, since one of them is the Jinchuriki they have long abused. Didn't you notice the slashed Hitayatesh? Without waiting for any response, he continued, once out of the country, we are going to get you too. He indicated Hogback and Absalom to a safe place. Hogback will need to begin his work into creating more powerful soldier-class zombies, though you can come with us if you wish, Absalom. He gave the man a moment to think and he responded, why not? I would like to see how the world has changed recently. I will need to see any possible terrain we may one day be fighting on. Naruto nodded, pleased. Absalom was a powerful fighter, and more importantly, an excellent commander. Why else would Moria give him the job of commanding his most powerful zombies? Naruto continued on, good. It will also probably help to see a familiar face when I attempt to recruit Perona. Perona? The both of them yelled at the same time. Hogback continued on, Perona is alive? But how? Naruto looked at the doctor and said, her powers. You know that she could separate her spirit from her body, right? Hogback nodded and he continued, well, a year or so after she was defeated by Bartholomew Kuma, she was faced with a powerful foe that had wounded her fatally. In a last-ditch effort to survive, she left her body, which died shortly after, and ever since then she has been a ghost trapped on Earth, though she is just as powerful as you remember. Hogback and Absalom were shocked into silence. Perona was actually around all this time? They thought. They had both believed that she had died at Thriller Bark. That will be the main goal of the journey from here on out, to find and recruit Perona, the Ghost Princess. It will be difficult since she doesn't even have a physical body anymore. But if we can find her, with Absalom vouching for me combined with what I have planned to offer her in return, I think we can do it. What are you planning to offer her, Naruto-sama? Naruto just smiled and said, oh, you'll see. Summary of the last chapter. Naruto has finally located and recruited Hogback and Absalom, who he had been searching for the past month and a half. Now that he had a decent frontline fighter and brilliant battlefield commander and a powerful medic on his side, he is ready to find the third and most likely the most powerful of the old three enigmas of Thriller Bark, the Ghost Princess Perona, though he still has all of Iwagakure after the two he rescued from it. Now let the chapter begin. Hogback's hideaway, hay that has a decent ring to it. Naruto, Hogback, and the rest of them were getting ready to leave. Naruto had the doctor bring together any and all research he had as well as any irreplaceable specimens and experiments that he had. He also had both Absalom and Hogback pack all of their essential belongings. By the time they got around to asking why, the reasons were obvious. It was probably Naruto setting explosive notes on the walls and ceiling of every last room. He meant to get rid of the cave and any evidence that they had been there. With Hogback's research and experiments sealed into scrolls, and all necessary baggage packed, Naruto set the seals around the cave on a 5-minute timer and moved all of them to a safe location he had prepared for this moment. He had intended to destroy any evidence of anyone ever living in that cave. He had also set up a barrier around the cave entrance to prevent the explosion from drawing any attention. He was covering his tracks completely. The fewer who knew of his new companions the better, as far as he was concerned. Naruto's hidden safe house. The 5 of them emerged into a sparsely furnished room with walls of stone. There was only one door leading from that room elsewhere, and there was no light, which was how Naruto got them there. "Where is this place, Naruto-san?" Haruka asked the one who brought her back from the grave. "This, my dear Haruka-chan," Naruto began, "is a place that I have been constructing over the past 2 years. It is a network of caves dug into the Hokage mountain of Konoha. The only real way in is through my Kagehoku technique. The only passages to the surface are the passageways left for air, and those are no wider than a drinking straw. There is no way in, no way out, and there is a year's supply of food and water for 2 people. But, Naruto-san, how did you create this place if there is no surface entrance? You would have had to start digging somewhere." Haruka persisted. Naruto smiled and replied, "Very true, Haruka-chan, very true. I started this cave system from a small chamber that I discovered in the rock of the mountain. Nobody knows about this place, not even the Hokage. I also built several seals into the infrastructure. The only way to find this place without being told about it is to break through the mountain and find it by accident. Any detecting jutsu, no matter how strong or sophisticated, will show only solid rock inhabiting this space." He turned to Hogback and said, "This is where you will be working, Doctor, at least for now. I will give you plenty of material to work with, of course." Hogback nodded, happy to be getting to work, and asked, "So, what are your plans now, Naruto-sama?" Naruto coolly replied, "We'll discuss that later. In the meantime, I suggest that you get settled. I will be back in a few minutes with the necessary material for you to begin your work." Naruto then walked into the shadows and vanished. They waited in silence for a moment before Hogback turned to the 2 young girls. He decided that he should get to know more about the mysterious Naruto. "I do not believe that we have been properly introduced." He began, "My name is Dr. James Hogback, and you are?" After a moment of being uncomfortable under the extremely strange man's gaze, Haruka's more jump into things headfirst side took control, and she said, "My name is Suzushiro Haruka, and this is my friend Kikukawa Yukino. Nice to meet you." Hogback seemed pleased by at least getting an answer out of the 2 and continued, "Yes, nice to meet you as well. Tell me, what do you know of the good Naruto-sama? You have known him longer after all." Haruka looked at him strangely before saying, "I really don't know him all that well. We haven't talked much. What do you know of him, Yukino?" Absalom, who had been examining one of the walls, perked up his ears. Yukino looked a bit flushed and embarrassed to be asked a direct question by Haruka, but she continued on anyway. "Well, we have talked a little." "And?" Haruka inquired. Yukino continued, "And he seems nice enough on the surface. He is kind to those that are kind to him in turn, and is overall a very generous person. He is very strong, that is obvious, and he is very patient as well." Haruka and Hogback looked a little let down. "Well, that's a lot to go on, isn't it?" Haruka mumbled under her breath. Yukino continued on as though uninterrupted, "However, that is only the facade he shows most people." "Huh," said both Doctor and Jonin simultaneously. Yukino continued, "He seems sincere and kind on the surface, but I believe that it is an elaborate act. I have been studying him without fail ever since I met him and have discovered several things about him that he probably doesn't want us to know. Things about him personally. I have learned that he is not a trustworthy person. He would betray anyone, no matter how close they were to him, if he believed that their death would serve him more than they would alive. If someone or something isn't useful to him, he would discard them without any remorse. He is obviously well informed, too well informed. I believe that he most likely has spies or undercover workers in several governments for him to amass such information. I know that he is the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and is slowly gaining her powers, though he confided in me that he doubts that he will ever be able to control them well. He is also patient. He has no trouble in waiting for his goals to be completed, be it a month, a year, or 20 years. He also hates being lied to and can tell when people do lie to him. If he was going to kill someone, he wouldn't care how it was done. He would be just as satisfied planting a bomb to go off in someone's office as he would thrusting a sword through his heart. And I have concluded that he has no forgiveness for anyone who betrays him. Overall, he is an extremely dangerous person, and not to be underestimated due to his age. Of course, these are all my speculations and my speculations only. The three of them looked at her, stunned. Haruka stammered out, how did you figure out all of that, Yukino? Yukino looked down and said, well, he got a bit talkative when I defeated him at chess. All conversation was cut short though, as Naruto reappeared, 2 scrolls in hand. Without a word, he crossed into another chamber. A minute or so later, there was a large puff of smoke that went through the cave. Naruto came back and told Hogback, I have established a freezer for you to work with. There are several dozen bodies inside. He handed Hogback the second scroll and said, this scroll contains the blueprints for the zombies I have created so far. I need you improve them as much as possible. Hogback nodded and took the scroll. Naruto waved a hand toward the center of the room and the shadows moved from the corners of the room, forming a circular table. Other shadows came together and formed 5 black chairs. Naruto sat down in one of them and motioned for the others to join him, which they did. Naruto gestured again and the tabletop changed into a very detailed map of the elemental countries. He began, as you probably guessed. These are the elemental countries. Perona could be anywhere in them, aside from Tsuchi no Kuni and Hai no Kuni. That leaves a lot of ground to cover. Way more than is possible to cover in the remaining 9 months of my training trip. What I need is the opinion of you 2-inch at this, he gestured to Hogback and Absalom. I need your opinion of where she most likely is. Anything that you can remember about her, places she liked, things like that. Anything you know about her that could make the search easier. The 2 several-hundred-year-old beings stayed silent in thought for a moment before Hogback said, she usually kept to herself. I only know that despite being a fruit user, she enjoyed being near the ocean. She also liked extremely creepy places, the creepier the better. If we are going by that, then any landlocked nations are probably not the place that you are looking for. A country with a beach or an island nation is much more likely. He looked at the beast man among them and said, Absalom, you knew her longer than I did. Do you know anything more? Absalom stayed silent for a moment before saying, Perona joined up with us shortly before you did. Doctor. You are right though, she did enjoy the water for some strange reason. She said that it reminded her of her home, but from what I know of her and her tendencies, the immense creature leaned over the map and with one claw circled 3 country names. From what I know of her, if she would be anywhere it would be one of these 3 places. Mizu no Kuni, Umi no Kuni, and Nami no Kuni. Those are the most likely places that she would be. Other than that, I have no idea. Naruto nodded and after a second of thought asked Absalom, are you sure that she would be there, more likely than anywhere else? Why those 3 in particular? Absalom pointed to Mizu no Kuni and said, Mizu no Kuni is famous for its thick mists, which is how Kirigakure got its name. The place is surrounded by water and the mists add in a certain air about the place that would appeal to her, if I remember her correctly. He pointed to Umi no Kuni. Umi no Kuni is also surrounded by water and has been plagued by rumors of the Kaima monster. This adds in a certain amount of fear, which would also catch Perona's interest. He pointed to Nami no Kuni. Nami no Kuni is an island nation, like Umi no Kuni. In addition to that, it has deep forests which mist from the sea tends to collect in. That seems perfect for someone like her. He looked at Naruto. I give no guarantee that she is in any of those places, but from the places listed on this map, those 3 seem the most likely. Naruto nodded and said, well, it looks like we have a plan. We will enter and investigate those 3 countries. It will take most of my remaining time to do so, but we will just have to do the best we can. While we are gone, I expect you to create as many marionettes as possible, Hogback, and also do your best to improve my current blueprints. He looked over to see the doctor already nose deep into the scroll containing Naruto's designs. The doctor said, "One step ahead of you, Naruto-sama. I have already examined most of these and I cannot see any simple means of improving them. They are excellent soldier-class zombies." Naruto nodded as Yukino asked, "Soldier class?" Naruto explained to the bespectacled girl, the zombies of Thriller Bark had several classes. The first were soldier-class zombies. These were reasonably strong and numerous. I would say that my soldier-class zombies are all mid to high Chunin level, since they have the shadows and therefore the techniques of ANBU. A few of them working together could defeat a Jounin or 2. The next is the class known as a general zombie. These are the elite, strong and smart enough to take on a Jounin one-on-one. A few of them working together could give a Kage a run for his money. The final class was the special class zombie. Hogback only created one and it ended up destroying half of Thriller Bark. A special class zombie would be strong enough to combat a summon boss or one of the lesser bijou. That is the main reason I recruited Hogback. While I can create soldier class zombies with ease, I have extreme difficulty in creating general class zombies and cannot begin to create a special class. In fact, I only have one general class zombie and he isn't finished yet. He is made to contain one specific shadow after all. Anyway, moving on, our first stop will be Nami no Kuni. Since from there we can get ships from there to Umi no Kuni and from there to Mizu no Kuni. Agreed. Everyone nodded, there was little choice. 1 week later. The 4 of them had made it. They were in Nami no Kuni. Not that it was anywhere easy to get there. The only way for them to get to the island chain was through boats, and even then, it had to be a big enough one for Absalom to ride upon invisibly, so as not to draw attention to his features. Plainly speaking, it was a gigantic pain in the ass for them all. They saw the beginnings of a bridge being built, but it wouldn't be completed for several years at least. Naruto and the rest were staying in 3 tents made for 2 people each. Naruto and Absalom kept one to themselves each, and the 2 girls slept together. What most of them didn't know was that he had a 4th tent, but he just kept the girls sleeping together to embarrass Yukino, since Haruka moved a lot in her sleep and usually ended up hugging the Jinchuriki before everyone woke up, leading to one of the deepest blushes the blonde had ever seen every morning. He found it all funny as hell. Naruto was actually wandering around the town near the soon-to-be bridge with Absalom keeping himself invisible nearby. Strong and smart he may be, but inconspicuous he was not. Naruto was searching for possible ways to spend the time in the city, as well as keeping an eye out for any particularly strong people that might make good marionettes if handled properly. He had set up a system with Hogback using the portrait zombies. He had a full-sized one in the cave system, so he could send things to the doctor, such as sealing scrolls full of material, and vice versa using the smaller portrait he kept in his coat. It was very useful, all things considered. Naruto had been walking around town for several hours, trying to find something worth his time while Yukino searched the country for anything that might indicate that woman's presence. From what he knew, Perona had been wandering around various countries, causing entire towns to have emotional breakdowns to try and ease her boredom. All well and good, he reasoned, but she was still hard as hell to find at any point in time. He had told Yukino to be especially careful to look for cities full of horrifyingly depressed people. That would probably mean that they had hit the jackpot and found her earlier. It really is terrifying, Naruto thought. It really is terrifying. What that woman can do. Perona's abilities revolved around spirits and ghosts. Her main tactic was a type of ghost that, should it go through someone, it would cause that person to have an immense emotional breakdown, losing all will to live and any focus whatsoever. As far as he knew, no one was immune to this effect. Since the thing that induced it was intangible and couldn't be stopped by any physical object, the ghost would just pass through it. It was a pretty nasty technique. More than one fight that Naruto knew of had been decided through sheer force of will and stubbornness. Being able to completely take that away from someone would leave nothing more than a sobbing wreck. The only person that had ever been able to resist that effect was that pirate sniper, Usopp, and he was the first one to ever defeat Perona. But that guy was unique, a freak of nature, and most importantly, long dead. In addition to that attack, she could also call upon ghosts that were explosive in nature. The smaller ones could blow holes in solid concrete a foot deep. The larger ones would blow away a building. Combined with the fact that she could create such ghosts without limit would make her an extremely useful person when it came to dealing with a large number of opponents or destroying a tough target. A combination of the two techniques, removing someone's will to live, effectively immobilizing them, and then blowing them away with the explosive ghosts was a very potent tactic. She could also leave her body indefinitely. Existing as a ghost after hiding her body somewhere else was one of the other things she could do. Someone that couldn't be hurt and could pass through walls would make an excellent short-range scout. Even more dangerous was the fact that she could still attack while in that intangible form, yet no one could hurt the spirit body. All things considered, Perona the Ghost Princess was not one to be taken lightly, no matter who you were. Her abilities made her one of the more dangerous people in existence at the moment. No one could survive one of the blasts from the larger ghost's head on, no one. That being said, if she managed to hit you with the negative hollow that removed a person's will to live, it was over shortly afterward. The fact that she was so dangerous was the main reason he wanted her on his side, before anyone else found her and realized what she could do. With any luck, what he had to offer her would make her work for him, and maybe a bit more down the line. While Naruto was lost in his musings, he had wandered into the port area, where dozens of ships docked and departed with cargo every day. All days except today apparently, as what he saw was a completely empty place. He looked around for a second before stumbling upon the reason behind the desertion. It was a large sign that said, "Under new management, Gato Transport." Naruto looked at the sign for a second before smiling. He just thought of an excellent way to pass the time. 2 hours later, Naruto was sitting at a small dango shop eating lunch. Absalom, as he was invisible, wasn't able to eat much, but if you looked closely, a stick of the dumplings would vanish every so often. Naruto was currently thinking. For the last 2 hours, he had launched inquiries into the Dear Gato. Apparently the man was slowly but surely buying every port and major shipping company in the country. Most of the people didn't see where this was going, but Naruto did. When a rich man gets a monopoly, it is never good for the common man. If his prediction was right, Gato would buy a monopoly on the shipping trade in Nami no Kuni, and once he did, he would raise prices through the goddamned roof, sucking the country dry for every last Rio. Mind you, he was about the only person in the country who realized where this was heading, but everyone else would realize it too. Maybe a few months too late to do jack squat about it, but they would realize it. Now, an ethical and moral person in that position would do something like try to warn the populace or try to stop Gato from obtaining his monopoly, and by doing so, he would save the people untold grief. Naruto, however, was not an ethical or moral person. He had every intention of getting something out of this situation. So an entire country suffered for his greed. Who was he to give a damn? No one, that's who. As far as the blonde was concerned, the entire world could face Armageddon the day after he died. As long as he wasn't affected by it, anything could happen to anyone. The main question was how to get something out of his knowledge of the very rich Gato's plans. It was a good thing that he had a very good plan on how to do so. In fact, he would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He ate the last of his dango and stood up before walking off to the campsite where he had left Yukino and Haruka. He had some new business in Nami no Kuni, and it would involve a certain diminutive and rich businessman. 2 hours later, Gato's office. Naruto snuck Gato's office, where he was currently sorting through a bunch of documents. Even incredibly rich men had to deal with paperwork. Massive businesses didn't run themselves, and neither did the country-conquering variety. He allowed himself to be seen by the short man just after he put the documents into a bulging folder that was marked Nami no Kuni, Ports and Trade, and wrapped a thick rubber band around it to keep it from bursting open. The first thing the short man did was gasp loudly and reach for a button that probably called some form of security, be it thugs or ninja. Naruto didn't particularly care to find out. As a result, the intercom was covered in a dome of darkness, and Gato was strapped to his own chair by several bands of shadow so thin that they could have been painted on. He could still speak, he just couldn't move. It wasn't all that uncomfortable either. Naruto just sat down in the chair facing the man's desk and looked at the man who was reeking with fear at the moment. Naruto kind of liked the smell of fear, but it wasn't really called for in this case. He started off, "Calm down, Gato-san. I am not here to hurt you." Gato stopped breathing so hard and began to calm down, though he looked wary. After all, what kind of person traps a person if they didn't intend them some kind of harm? Naruto continued on, standing up from the rather uncomfortable chair and pacing around the room. No, I am not here to hurt you. In fact, I am here to make your life absolutely wonderful. You can join the conversation at any time, by the way. Gato began to get his brain in order before asking this strange man, who are you? Naruto smirked as he examined a fake deer's head mounted on the wall. Glad to hear that I'm not talking to myself. As for who I am, well, that changes depending on who you talk to. To some I am master, to very few I am friend, to many I am demon, but to you I am benefactor, a business partner even. Gato looked at the man strangely. A business partner? The diminutive man continued on, oblivious to the strange stare he was getting from the room's other occupant. Yes, a business partner. That fits the bill nicely. Sorry for strapping you down, by the way, but I couldn't have you causing a fuss. Anyway, I have come upon your plans regarding the monopolization and subjugation of Nami no Kuni. Gato's fear went into overdrive. If anyone knew about that before he was ready, he was screwed, and he knew it. What do you want from me? He asked. Let me guess, you're going to try and blackmail me, eh? Dangle some information over my head and wrap me around your finger? Or are you some do-gooder looking to convince me to change my ways? Naruto looked over at the scared and somewhat angry businessman before sighing and saying, Oh, please, why would I want to stop you? I don't live in this country, so why should I care? Blackmail you? Definitely not. That never ends well for either party. No, in fact, I have come here to assist you in your little conquest. For a reasonable sum of cash, I am willing to provide the best combatants that you will ever find. Gato once more looked at the man oddly. What, you mean ninja? I could just hire some nuke nin. No one cares if they go missing once the job is done. If you're some sort of advertiser for a hidden village, you should spruce up your technique. It definitely used some work. Naruto turned and faced the man. Good. He's getting his sharp tongue back. A good sign. Maybe we can finally get some work done here. He walked over to the man while saying, Ninja? Not quite. I said the best combatants that you will ever find. You will need more than a little muscle to complete your goals, and for an honest monthly payment, I am willing to let you rent them. Ninja, you see, have one major flaw: they can die. The fighters that I am offering you, however, cannot. Gato was unbelieving. A group of immortal warriors? The only immortal person that Gato knew of was that hidden guy in the bingo book. He read through the thing occasionally, looking for ninja that are strong, but not too strong for him to offer work to. It was understandable that he was skeptical. Naruto looked at the man and said, Don't believe me, huh? Okay, fair enough. It is a bit tough to swallow, but I am more than willing to give a demonstration. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a picture frame. He tapped the glass, and after a few seconds he said, Get me Ray. A few seconds later, a whispery voice that made shivers run up Gato's spine came from the strange device. The voice said, She is on the other side, awaiting your orders, master. Naruto nodded and said, Good. Tell her this. Take it 1 through 10 and put them in a scroll. Give them to the portrait to give to me. A whispery confirmation was heard, and after a few minutes an entire hand emerged from the frame, holding a medium-sized scroll. He took it and said, Dismissed, and put the frame back from where he got it. Naruto opened the scroll and inserted chakra into the 10 symbols inscribed on the paper. 10 rotted, sewed-together corpses knelt before him. You called upon us, master? The one with a number 1 tattooed upon its forehead spoke. Naruto turned and spoke to Gato. These, my friend, are the warriors I am talking about. Incapable of dying and extremely strong. I am willing to lend them to you for the simple sum of 300,000 ryo a month. Think about it for a moment. A squadron of invincible warriors doing your bidding. You would be unbeatable to any who would cross you. It would make your conquering of the country much easier. Why send in an army of hired muscle when you can send in 10 who cannot be defeated? You would definitely save money in the long run, don't you think? Gato thought about it and thought about just how weird this was. Just who is this guy? He thought. Naruto continued on, and just in case you do not believe me, Naruto made a motion with his hand and his axe appeared there. He swung it down and cut off the head of one of the 10 kneeling before him. Despite the fact that it was a lethal blow, no blood erupted from the wounds, the body did not drop to the floor, it kept still in a kneeling position. The only noise was from the severed head, which only asked, Master, May I reattach my head? Gatu was in absolute shock. He had never seen anything like that before. He saw the value behind this and the excellent deal that he was being offered, especially when the man nodded and the headless body stood, walked over, and picked up its own head before sticking it on. Before kneeling before him again as he was before, the wound already sealed. He readily agreed to his terms. Naruto smiled. That was too easy. He handed Gatu a card with a number on it. He said to him, "Wire the money to that number once a month, every month. I am glad to see that you made the right choice." He gestured and the bands of darkness holding Gatu captive vanished. He said, "There is also a place for you to send messages to should you require my presence given any trouble concerning the merchandise." He turned to the kneeling corpses and said, "Listen here. Until I say otherwise, you are to call that man." He pointed to Gatu Master. "You are to obey his every command that does not involve betraying me until I say otherwise. Do you understand?" There was a mumbled, "Yes, Master." Naruto just said, "Good. Now then, Gata-san, I believe our business is done here?" Gata stood up and crossed over to Naruto and said while holding out his hand, "Yes, definitely. What should I call you?" Naruto shook the man's hand and said, "I told you already, to you I am benefactor. I believe this is the beginning of a wonderful business relationship, Gata-san." "Oh yes, most certainly," the small businessman exclaimed, nearly salivating at the thought of what he could do with the new help, as the strange man vanished into thin air. Naruto knew the man would keep his word. He smelled the truth on his words. 2 hours later, Naruto came back to the campsite where he left Yukino, Haruka, and Absalom. He said to them, "Okay, thanks to Yukino-chan, we know that Perona is not in Nami no Kuni. Oh well, better luck next time. Now then, pack up and come on. I have a boat ready to get us out of here." He moved over to his own tent and sealed it up. The others quickly did the same, following the small blonde. He was happy. He had a steady source of income and he had managed to find a way to give the soldier class a field test. So far, so good, but they had a boat to catch to Umi no Kuni. Summary of last chapter. Naruto began his search for Perona and narrowed down his search to 3 countries. He managed to make a deal with Gatu to rent some of his zombies for an obscene sum of money. Then he, Absalom, Yukino, and Haruka are making their way to Umi no Kuni, the land of the sea. And now Lounger begins the chapter. Random boat on the way to Umi no Kuni. They had the same trouble getting to Umi no Kuni as they did getting to Nami no Kuni. In other words, trying to find a large enough boat for the lot of them to travel and have the invisible Absalom go unnoticed. They made it, and the best thing was that they didn't have to kill the boat operator this time since Naruto now had some money to his name, thanks to the obscenely rich Gatu. 2 hours later, they were staying in a decent-sized hotel in the port town on Hahajima, the largest island in the country. Yukino was in the forest, using her abilities to look for their target, while Haruka was guarding her as she searched. As the girls were out in the woods, Naruto and Absalom were doing what they did in Nami no Kuni. In other words, they were looking for some way to pass the time while Yukino determined whether or not they were wasting time there in the first place. Absalom was currently looking up the skirt of some young fishermen's daughters while Naruto was looking up rumors concerning the Kaima creature that was plaguing the waters around the country. Naruto was curious about the creature. He was also curious about what secrets that Kikaijima, the island where the beast was said to appear, held. Apparently anyone that sailed too close to the island was never seen again. That combined with the Kaima monster targeting ships recently meant that things would certainly get out of hand within the next few years. Naruto knew that Orochimaru once had a compound in the area, but that it was abandoned shortly before the Serpent Sannin's defection. He was wondering if the old compound and the Kaima monster could be connected. Maybe an escaped lab experiment? Judging by Orochimaru's previous work, he decided that it was quite likely, and if that was the case then who knew what sort of stuff he could find in that compound. He didn't know where it was, but judging by the disappearances, Kikaijima seemed to be a good guess. Naruto decided his basic plan of action. 1. He would find something to eat and hopefully dissuade Absalom from stalking that fisherman's daughter. 2. He would wait for the results of Yukino's search for their target, and 3. He would pay the very mysterious Kikaijima a little visit, Kaima monster or not. A possibility of finding out about the Snake Sannin's experiments was too good to pass up. especially since the compound in Umi no Kuni was where he did most of his work on the curse seal. Information on that would be worth the entire trip to Umi no Kuni, whether or not they found Perona. The group's apartment, 3 hours later. After he managed to prevent Absalom from stalking that girl, they met up with Yukino and Haruka and returned to the hotel. Yukino's report was less than satisfactory, but it could have been worse. Apparently there was an old story of a city vanishing in a single night in a massive explosion, and it was noted that the people of that town had been cripplingly depressed the day before it happened, but Perona was not in the country. It was more than likely that she was here at some point, but she definitely was not there now. Frustratingly elusive woman aside, they at least had a lead. She was there a few years ago, that was a good sign. As for the business at hand, it was obvious that things were not what most considered normal. Fishing boats and commercial ships had been attacked and looted at random for the last 6 months or so, and anyone who got too close to Kikaijima never returned. The only person who had returned from Kikaijima was a local outcast by the name of Isaribi. She was a young girl that had been ostracized due to actually returning from Kikaijima. Apparently people, in their idiotic fear of the unknown, believed her to be a monster, an unnatural being that did not belong. This did not sit well with Naruto, who faced similar treatment from Konoha. Kikaijima, the Kaima monster, and the mysterious girl Isaribi, Naruto thought. Those three things are definitely connected. But how? Naruto told them what he had planned. He started off, okay, here's what we are going to do. A boat filled with expensive merchandise is going to sail tomorrow. This is a monthly shipment to a large market in Mizu no Kuni. These shipments are usually attacked by this Kaima. As a result, there is a good chance that the Kaima will appear and attack the boat. Absalom, you will trail this Isaribi girl during this time. Absalom nodded and Naruto continued on. As for the attack itself, it will be observed by Yukino-chan. She will also use her abilities to scout out Kikaijima today. Yukino nodded. Haruka-chan and I will infiltrate Kikaijima the day after tomorrow, using the information granted to us by Yukino-chan. Understood? They all nodded and then Naruto said, good, Yukino-chan, you had best get the scouting done before it gets too dark out. Haruka-chan, you should go with her. I am going to get some sleep. See you in the morning. Without another word, Naruto laid down and was out like a light. Absalom took a second bed, being rather tired from stalking women that caught his eye. Yukino and Haruka shared a look and left. The next morning, Naruto woke up before anyone else did. He looked over the room. Absalom was still sleeping, as were Haruka and Yukino in the third bed. Naruto cracked a huge grin at the position the two were in. Haruka had been moving in her sleep again. At the moment her head was using Yukino's chest as a pillow, and one of her hands was resting just above the hem of Yukino's pants. Naruto snuck over and quietly woke Yukino up. He made sure that she couldn't see him when she woke up. She looked down and Naruto swore that she invented a new shade of red. She couldn't really move that well since one of her arms was trapped under Haruka. As though awakened by Yukino's return to consciousness, Haruka opened her eyes and after a second realized the position she was in. She moved away so quickly she fell of the bed. Naruto laughed his ass off at the both of them. Then and there, he managed to ask them, so, I take it you 2H had a good night? Ha 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 ha. A moment later a shadow moved from the bed and blocked a thrown pillow. Absalom slept through the entire thing. An hour later, after waking up Absalom and eating breakfast, the beast man left to begin his job for the day, stalking a young girl. Yukino and Haruka left civilized areas so that Yukino could use her abilities to watch the attack. Haruka was there to guard her as she did so. The entire thing took a lot of concentration on the Jinchuriki's part, and she wouldn't be able to defend herself without letting the whole thing vanish. As a result, Naruto had jack squat to do until the next day, so he just wandered around town. He idly wondered when Yukino would finally tell Haruka how she felt. In his opinion, the sooner she told the other girl and got laid the better, it would probably help with her confidence problems. He also wondered if the bespectacled Jinchuriki could use Mokutan Jutsus. She had a plant monster sealed into her, so he supposed it was in the realm of possibility. He would have to investigate that later though. He checked the time. He had 3 hours until noon, when the ship would launch. He guessed he would just have to find something to occupy his time until then. After that he could go after it and watch Takaima attack. That was sure to happen. Yukino's scouting was second to none, but an eyewitness perspective would help in his planning. Depending on how powerful the beast was, he might have to call off the entire operation. Not likely, but possible. Hahajima, the docks, 12 p.m. Naruto watched the workers load the boat with dozens of crates. The ship was undergoing its last-minute preparations for the week-long voyage to Mizu no Kuni, where they would sell it all for a large profit. That is assuming, of course, that they managed to get there. Naruto was thinking at the moment, if they are so afraid of a sea monster, why don't they just hire Kiri Ninja to escort the ship or something? Hell, since Kiri buys a decent percentage of the goods sold, they may even be able to get some kind of a discount. It's just stupidity bordering on insanity. Wait a second, I spoke too soon. Indeed he did, for at that moment, Naruto spotted the trio of Chunin who were probably there to protect the boat, judging by the fact that they were positioned around the boat at random points. Obviously from Kirigakure, if the Hittite they wore were real. This presented a problem. Naruto wanted this little robbery to go off without a hitch. He didn't want the thing dead. Well, not yet anyway. Konoha and its allies had a decent amount of sea trade, so if he could capture and tame it, or if it was sentient, convince the thing to work with him, it could be very useful down the line. If not, well, no one would really miss the thing. Either way, he didn't want the Kaima to go down at the moment. He had a choice: let the ninja go on the voyage, and while it carries the risk of the creature being killed, it would give a good demonstration of how powerful it and its possible allies were. On the other hand, if he eliminated the ninja beforehand, the boat was guaranteed to be successfully robbed, and he would get a clear view of the people responsible and perhaps overhear something useful. Well, he reasoned, if it dies, it probably wouldn't be worth the trouble anyway. Plus, a fight will be way more entertaining than a plain old robbing. He decided to let the ninja go. It would to see the creature's full abilities and, more importantly, entertain him, since he was almost bored to tears at the moment. 1 hour later, the ocean. Naruto was following the ship via water, walking while being hidden by a genjutsu. He was wondering where the hell this thing was. It had been an hour already, and he had seen nothing. If the thing turned out to be fake like most people outside of the country believed, he would be really pissed off. He was kind of surprised that the Kiri ninja hadn't spotted him. The genjutsu wasn't that strong. It would easily fool any genin. He could understand it getting by newbie Chunin, but experienced Chunin and above should have had little trouble dispelling it. It was a little risky putting an understrength genjutsu over himself given the presence of enemies, but this was a possibility to test the power of Kirigakure's Chunin. So far, unless they were new to their rank, which is unlikely due to the somewhat important nature of the mission they were on, he was extremely disappointed. Then he was shook from his musings by the ship suddenly shaking somewhat badly. Naruto smiled. At last the thing decided to get off its ass and do what it most likely did best. Naruto watched as the ship gradually slipped off of its course and plowed headfirst into a nearby rock formation. The people who managed to get a hold of something solid were a bit shaken up, but otherwise okay. As for those who didn't, well, one bashed his head into a rock, making a very pretty mural on said piece of stonework. The second skid about 3 yards on his nose before sliding into the water unconscious, and the last, well, he got hit in the stones by a stone, sang soprano for about 2 seconds before blacking out and going under. Naruto chuckled under his breath, wishing he had brought a camera for that last one, and focused hard on engraving that moment in his memory. He watched the proceedings on the boat carefully. A man with white hair in a lab coat was telling the captain that if he gave up the cargo without a fight, he would spare the lives of him and the remaining 2 crew members. He looked for the ninja and found 2 of them with scalpels in their throats, most likely courtesy of the white-haired man, and the third was out cold. There was a broken bottle near him, probably a liquid that vaporized into a gaseous sleeping agent upon contact with the air. Naruto was watching the captain, wondering if the man would do as the stranger asked. Either way, he would end up dead. He smelled the lie from the white-haired man when he said the part about sparing them all. The captain denied the assailant's false offer and was promptly met with a scalpel to the neck. The remaining 2 crewmen drew their swords and charged the man, only to be stopped. One was hit by a blast of water and forced into the ocean, while the other was nailed by a sudden blast of wind and shredded. When Naruto looked over to where the blasts had originated from and saw 2 figures, the first was a combination of fish and human that quickly went under the water and went in the direction of the fallen sailor. The second was a rather tall man with red eyes, white hair, and a small scar near his chin. This man looked toward the man wearing the lab coat and said, "Your orders, Amachi-sama?" The newly named Amachi looked over from the recently shredded body and said, "Start unloading the cargo. Mabashi should be here soon with the boat." Nice job with that sailor, by the way, Jean. The newly named Jean nodded and headed below deck. The fish creature that was most likely the Kaima monster emerged from the depths and was greeted by Amachi. Excellent job, Isaribi-chan, he said. She meekly replied, Thank you, Amachi-sama. Naruto's eyes widened as he realized what had most likely been going on. If that Isaribi is the same Isaribi that I told Absalom to follow, then this guy must be behind the disappearances near Kikaijima since she returned from there. Judging by his attire, he is either a doctor or, more likely judging by his speed and knife work, a mednin. Those two, Jean, and the man coming with the boat, Mabashi, must be his assistants with whatever it is he is doing. He is probably conducting some form of research in Orochimaru's compound on Kikaijima, whether at his order or not has yet to be seen. Since they all refer to him as Sama, he is most likely the leader. If he is the leader, then the group must be small. More than likely the entire group is here, or will be once the mysterious Mabashi makes his entrance. If it wasn't small, then their leader wouldn't have come in person to help with grunt work. Since the entire team is here, I can eliminate the need to hunt through the maze that Orochimaru's compound almost assuredly is. If that is the case, then the matter is settled. Kill the two assistants and capture the remaining two. Naruto waited while the one called Jean brought up several crates as a boat showed up, steered by a red-haired man. He called out, Hey, Amachi-sama, it seems everything went okay. Naruto noticed that silver flashed from the man's mouth, most likely a tongue stud or something. He didn't think about it anymore before a spike of darkness emerged from the shadow left by the boat ran the guy through. Amachi and Isaribi looked around wildly as a similar spike ran through Jean. Thin bands of darkness trapped the arms and legs of the remaining two as Naruto stepped on board the downed ship and released the illusion concealing him. He stepped up to the girl, whose features returned to normal after she was captured, well as normal as you can look when scales covered random patches of skin. He asked her, You are Isaribi, the girl who was ostracized by the inhabitants of Hahajima after you returned from Kikaijima, correct? She shakily nodded, eyes filled with fear, and he continued on. You are also the Kaima monster, correct? She once again nodded. Naruto looked her up and down and said, Huh, I thought you would be bigger. He turned to the downed medical ninja and said, Your name is Amachi, yes? The man nodded, a strange combo of fear and fury in his eyes. Naruto asked him, So, what's your story? What do you have to do with the compound on Kikaijima, the kidnappings, this girl's appearance, the Kaima monster, and Orochimaru? Oh, don't bother lying to me, I will be able to tell. And if I catch you lying, I will kill you. If I don't, well, I might let you live. The man, driven by his fear, told Naruto of what had been happening over the last few years on Kikaijima. How Orochimaru started the base along with him and had him running it. How Mitarashi Anko had her curse seal applied there. About Orochimaru abandoning the fishman research that Amachi had continued. Isaribi being a guinea pig in said research. How he had helped spread the rumors about the Kaima by letting people live, and his plans in general. Naruto nodded and asked the girl, Why do you work for this scumbag? Amachi looked pissed and Isaribi looked surprised. She stammered out, He promised that he would return me to being human if I helped him. Naruto nodded again and turned to the doctor. He asked, Are you planning on, or even capable of fulfilling that promise? Keep in mind that the same rules from before apply. Amachi gritted his teeth for a second before spitting out, Hell no! I have perfected the way to turn someone from human into a Kaima and give them the ability to go fully from one to the other at will, but it is completely impossible to change an imperfect specimen into a perfect result. Naruto nodded and said to the man, So, you were using an ostracized girl's hope of becoming human again to manipulate her into serving you? Amachi nodded and Naruto smiled before saying, I like your style. He took a moment to appreciate Amachi's surprised look before asking, So, do you have any perfect results of your research? Also, are there any remains of Orochimaru's research on the curse seal in the compound? Amachi shook his head before saying, None but myself, and that is only a recent development. As for the curse seal, yes, I helped Orochimaru create it, but he took the research of it with him when he left, along with the specimen we extracted the enzymes used to create the seal from. Naruto nodded before turning to the girl and said, You kind of remind me of a young me, ostracized, used, lied to, and tormented. In fact, if you were more cunning and malicious and a lot stronger, you could be me at a younger age. As a result, It is with some pleasure that I do this. At the word, this a spike rammed through Isaribi's chest and she dropped to the ground. Amachi gasped as he saw the boy kill Isaribi. He stammered out, but you said that she was like a younger you. Why would you kill her? He looked at the bound man before saying, I know what I said. If I were faced by some younger me from some other dimension or something, I would kill him too. I don't want an opponent anything like me, and I can guarantee that we wouldn't get along. As for you, there are no remnants of the cursed seal research left. None at all. Amachi nodded and went the way of Isaribi. Then you are useless. Naruto looked around the various wreckage before mumbling to himself, right, since Isaribi lost Absalom by going into water, he will probably be at the hotel room. Since Yukino saw that little incident for sure, she and Haruka will be back at the room soon too. He checked the time. Well, that was a good way to blow 2 hours. Looks like it's time to move on. 1.5 hours later. Naruto got back to the hotel room and told the group, right, the Kaima is taken care of. There will be no need to search the compound. There's nothing of interest there. I got us some tickets to a boat heading for Mizu no Kuni in an hour. So get everything you want to take with you. Naruto took the kunai he had hidden under his pillow and put it back in his coat, and the others gathered up everything that was theirs, except Absalom, who took all that was his and the ashtray. Souvenir, he replied when asked about it. After that they left and headed for the docks where their boat was soon to depart for their next destination. Mizu no Kuni, the home of Kirigakure, the village hidden in the mist, and with any luck, the ghost Princess Perona. Summary of the last chapter. Naruto and his group traveled to and from Umi no Kuni, accidentally dealing with the Kaima monster while inquiring about the research conducted in the compound Orochimaru had set up on Kikaijima. Now they are heading for Mizu no Kuni, where they hope to finally locate Perona. Naruto's campsite. They had made it into Mizu no Kuni with some difficulties. Unlike the countries they had been to before, with the exception of Suki no Kuni, Mizu no Kuni had a hidden village, and therefore border patrols. Every boat into and out of the country was searched by Kiri ninja for bandits, missing nin, and other wanted criminals. It wasn't that they were widely recognized, but 2 women and a boy wearing ninja garb, along with an invisible beast man. Although he couldn't be seen, he could still be detected by other means. It would be rather odd, and they didn't want to be noticed by the local authorities. As a result, they had jumped ship about 3/4 through their journey on the water after altering the boat operator's memories with a strong genjutsu courtesy of Yukino. Haruka had to carry Absalom across the water as could swim about as well as an infant. The curse of eating a devil fruit, some form of amazing ability, but you become as suited to the water as a fish was suited for dry land. They had to be extremely careful to avoid the border patrols when they got to shore. Mizu no Kuni wasn't as big as the other 4 great ninja village countries, so their borders were a lot easier to defend from criminals and the like. They had a few close shaves with some Kiri Chunin, but they managed to get into the country without too much trouble, no crippling injuries, no dead people on either side, and they still had a low profile. As long as they stayed away from the borders and far away from Kirigakure itself and the capital, they probably wouldn't encounter anyone that could actually defend themselves until they, hopefully, found Perona. They had just finished setting up the tents to protect against the rain that was sure to fall, as Mizu no Kuni had more precipitation than any other country other than Aim no Kuni. When Haruka asked Naruto-san, "What is this Perona person like?" Naruto looked up from setting up his bedroll inside his tent and said, rather eloquently, "Huh." Haruka asked the question again and Naruto replied, "Oh, what's Perona like? You should have just said that in the first place. You should probably ask Absalom. He's the one that actually knew her." As a result, Haruka ended up asking the inhuman pervert the same question. Absalom blandly said, "What's Perona like? Well, she could have changed since I last saw her, but the Perona I knew was a rather strange person. She was very dangerous, thanks to her abilities, so people tended to treat her with a lot of respect. She was very strict with her subordinates. I remember that, and had a slight obsession with things that she deemed cute. Mind you, her definition of the word included things that could have come straight out of someone's nightmares. She was a heavy sleeper and never liked direct conflict. She always preferred to fight long range whenever she was forced into combat. She really hated insects of any kind, especially cockroaches. She would be a person easy to remember if you saw her. There were 3 things that you would never forget about her: her eyes, her laugh as it was very distinctive, and her crown. She always wore a black and red crown like old English monarchs. She never took the thing off, even when bathing or sleeping. Hehehe. At this point Absalom blushed rather noticeably and was smacked over the head. She slammed mercilessly into the ground. By Haruka mumbling, "Damn pervert." She went over to her tent and decided to get some sleep. If they were going to find this person tomorrow, they would need their energy. The others apparently agreed as they joined her in sleep within the next hour. The next morning, Naruto woke up before anyone else once again, and he had the honor of waking everyone up. He did so by using a tried and tested method that everyone knows. It was called pouring ice-cold water over their heads and getting the hell out of there. Once the curses of varying volumes had died down and everyone had garbed themselves in their normal attire, Naruto had Yukino use her abilities to hopefully locate Perona. As they say, third time's the charm. As Yukino gathered her chakra and focused her thoughts in preparation for using her abilities to locate the ghost princess, going by a picture Naruto created by putting an illusion over a stone, Naruto himself was preparing to catch breakfast. Naruto managed to catch some 10 or so fish by manipulating the nearby shadows to form a tight net in the river. He skewered them onto a nearby stick and headed back. As Naruto neared the camp though, he heard a very unwanted thing. The sound of a large explosion. Naruto tossed the fish into the bushes and ran back to the camp as fast as he could. He was shocked. He had never anticipated this. His team was facing off against a group of Kiri ninja. He figured that they must have recently completed a mission and their path home crossed near their campsite or something, because he chose the spot specifically so that they would be far away from the paths most ninja took. He examined the ninja, staying hidden as each group waited for the other to make the first move. There were 4 of them total. One of them wore his hair in a strange, spiking style and wielded a sword that was jagged on one side and flat on the other. Its hilt was very strange looking as well. The man wore ninja sandals and pants, and wore no shirt at all. He also had an eye patch over his left eye. He had a glint of madness in his one visible eye. Naruto felt something about the man, something he couldn't put his finger on, like he had seen him somewhere before. Regardless, he was obviously an experienced warrior, almost guaranteed to be a jounin. He wore a Kiri Hitai-8 around his neck. The other 3 were a lot less hardened based on the shaking of their knees, and the inexperience could be felt like an aura around them. One of them had shoulder-length black hair and an aura of grace about him that vanished due to his fear. He was wearing normal shinobi garb and a Kiri Hitai-8 around one arm. He held a kunai in the standard guard position and seemed to be at least competent, if a little young. The second wore similar clothing to his comrade, and had his hair in a military crop along with black sunglasses. He had the Kiri Hitai-8 on his forehead, and though he held a kunai and acted brave, Naruto could smell his fear. The last was strange as he was completely bald and had small red markings near his eyes. He wore the same clothing his other comrades wore, and he had the Kiri Hitai-8 around his waist, and of them, he seemed the most eager for a fight of the 3. He seemed to have a watered-down version of the madness the first man had. Naruto pondered over the 4. He didn't recognize the other 3, but the first seemed familiar and was definitely dangerous. His team didn't miss a beat. Yukino and Haruka stood side by side, Yukino with kunai in hand in a reverse grip, Haruka with 2 kunai. Absalom crouched with his arms low, his face set in a feral sneer. Naruto stayed hidden. Many people of his age would have jumped in headfirst, but he knew the value that the element of surprise held. He was watching the man with the sword carefully. He knew he had seen him somewhere before. He knew it as certainly as he knew that grass was green, but he couldn't place him or come up with a name, and it was driving him nuts. His question was answered when the ninja with the shoulder-length hair asked the first man, "Zaraki-sensei, who are these guys? What should we do?" The name hit Naruto like a bucket of ice water. He knew the name and he knew where he had seen the man before. He thought to himself, Zaraki Kenpachi, the madman of the hidden mist. One of the 3 remaining loyal members of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, the Kiri no Shinobigatana Nananinshu. I see, he must be acting as a jounin sensei, and those other 3 must be the genin he is leading, which explains why they're so afraid. Fuck. I never expected to run into someone like him. This is bad. Zaraki is supposed to be one of the strongest of the 7, alongside Hoshigaki Kisame himself. Of all the possible enemies. No, I have to think positive here. Zaraki is strong, but he isn't unbeatable. No one is. With 3 newbie genin to protect, he could be ambushed. Best case scenario, we managed to capture him alive. Or we could. Naruto's thoughts were going a mile a minute. He knew that although Zaraki was one of the strongest of the 7, they couldn't run. If they did, he would be able to bring information about them back to Kiri, and before you could say knife to the throat, they would have Kiri Hunter Ninja coming after them on the grounds that they would all be Nukenin from IWA, which was half true. If they managed to defeat Zaraki, then his disappearance would be heavily investigated. Of bloody course, Naruto thought, of all the possible opponents we could have been stuck with, it had to be a fucking celebrity. He decided that his best chance was to strike at the genin, forcing Zaraki to protect them. He laid low and waited for his moment. As for the great swordsman himself, things weren't looking too good. He had 3 genin in tow, barely a month from the academy, which had just completed their first C-rank mission. And they stumble upon a camp of Nukenin from a village that was famous for powerful Doton jutsus. Before they could prepare a plan, fucking Ikika drops a kunai with an explosive note tied around it, setting off an explosive that allows them to find their location, and now here they were. I suppose he thought, this is what I get for taking a shortcut. He knew that things were looking bad. The 3 of them handled themselves like professionals, almost guaranteed to be jounin, and he had a trio of greenhorn genin to protect. These were far from the best odds he had ever faced. He knew that if the battle dragged out, he would be screwed. They would outlast him. He had to end the battle quickly. Taking that to heart, he rushed forward, sword in hand. Naruto watched carefully as the spiky-haired ninja rushed forward. This would be the first time he had seen his team in real combat. The 3 of them dodged aside from the sideways slash that he used, and while they were in the air, Absalom blasted the swordsman with one of the invisible cannons strapped to him arms before vanishing, while Haruka launched a volley of kunai toward the genin. The blasted Zaraki turned out to be a Mizu Bunshin, and the real thing appeared in front of the 3 genin and deflected the knives that would have impaled them at the speed they were going. He mumbled to the genin as he kept his opponents in sight, looking for the 3rd. You 3 need to get out of here, fast. You guys would only get in my way, and if you stay you will get killed. Understand? The 3 nodded and Naruto continued to listen in. I will give you guys a chance and you need to take it. When I give the signal, run and get back to Kiri. Tell the yondaime that 3 A-rank Nukenin from Iwagakure are in the area. I will follow you when I can. Okay? The 3 nodded again and he whispered, okay. The powerful jounin went through several hand seals and mumbled, Kirigakure no jutsu. Soon afterward, a thick mist rolled in, beginning to obscure the group from view. The mist took a few seconds, but it eventually covered a good distance around the clearing and enshrouded the clearing itself. Naruto felt the genin try to run as Zaraki rushed Yukino and Haruka, who repelled his assault. Absalom was getting behind him. Naruto manipulated the shadows and formed a wall in front of the genin, preventing them from escaping. They were the key to winning this fight as easily as possible. He wasn't letting them get away. Since the genin could barely see in the thick mist, they ran smack dab into the wall of darkness and reeled backward. Naruto formed a few more walls around them, leaving only one direction for them to travel in, back towards the fighting. Since they were inexperienced and far too weak to penetrate the wall, not to mention nearly blind in the thick mist, they followed the only path they could, right back into the clearing, though they didn't know it. They arrived just in time to hear the boom of one of Absalom's cannon shots nailing Zaraki in the side, sending him flying into a tree, his side bleeding badly. Naruto winced when he saw that. He wanted to catch Zaraki alive since the shadow couldn't be taken from a dead man. As much as he would love to jump into the fight from a distance and end the thing now, he couldn't use his best techniques without his own shadow, and though he could call the shadow to him and have it there within a few seconds, it was guaranteed to be watched, so such an action would blow his cover with Konoha. He would have to step in at the last possible moment to subdue and transport the still-living Zaraki. The man in question, whoever, was in both blazing pain and immense confusion. He was in pain because of the bad wound in his side, and was confused as to how he got it. He didn't sense any genjutsu and he didn't sense any chakra being used. He didn't know how the 3rd enemy did this to him, but he knew that it was the beast man that did it. Then, of all things, he saw his genin team watching the fight. He roared at them, "What the hell are you doing here?" He yelled. "Get the hell out of here now. We can't find our way out of here, Zaraki-sensei," the bald one yelled. There's something stopping us from leaving, Zaraki cursed under his breath. With the genin there to slow him down, his chances of winning that were already slim were getting lower, and he knew it. His eyes widened as one of the two women, the one with glasses, whispered something to the blonde one, and turned toward the younger ninja. He rushed toward the brown-haired woman, determined to stop her from hurting the genin when he was met by a blast just like the one he felt before, only it hit him in his other side and sent him flying in the other direction. He watched in a pain-filled daze as his team scattered and charged the woman, knowing that they couldn't escape from such a high-level opponent, only for one of them to be met by a blast just like he had, and since their bodies were nowhere near as strong as his, he saw the boy get ripped in two. As for the other two, one of them had their kunai parried by the brown-haired woman before slitting the boy's throat, and the other was pierced through head and heart by darkness? Indeed, the shadows had stretched from their places below the tents and pierced the third boy's body, ending his life. Zaraki knew that this was it for him. The adrenaline was keeping the pain somewhat numbed, but he knew that his wounds, if not seen to by an expert medic in the next few minutes, would be fatal. He never expected something like this to happen. He didn't know why he couldn't take these guys out. He never had this much trouble with an opponent before. Ever since Kurosaki died and let the 7 swordsmen decrease to 6, they all went downhill. Zabuza, Kisame, and Raiga went rogue, and Tosen went blind, though it never really bothered the man. He and Jin were the only ones to have changed the least. Jin had only grown a bit creepier and he hadn't changed at all. But against 2 opponents of high strength and worked extremely well together, which would have posed anyone a challenge, he still would have fought on even ground. It was the third that did it for him. He couldn't detect the beast man, and as a result he was there, lying against a tree with his lifeblood pouring through his sides. He tried to rise, but the sudden jolt of pain that the action brought drove the man from a slight crouch to his knees. He then drifted into unconsciousness. Naruto moved quickly, smiling the whole way. Apparently the rumors he had heard about Zaraki were false. He really didn't live up to his reputation. He was very strong, but he couldn't have been on par with Kisame. Then again, Kisame went rogue almost 10 years ago. Maybe Zaraki had gotten old. He was in his early 50s now. His team worked very well. Apparently Yukino was only shy outside of battle. In battle she didn't care about taking lives that much, and her teamwork with the skilled Haruka was amazing. Absalom had used his abilities well too, keeping himself undetected and nailing Zaraki when the opportunity arose. It was a good system. Absalom reappeared as he approached. "Nice work," he called to them. Haruka shouted, "Where the hell were you?" as he got closer and approached Zaraki's dying body. He told them as he prepared to leave, "I was watching the fight, waiting for a chance to attack, but you guys finished him off before I could. Nice job. Get rid of the genin's bodies while I'm gone. I'll be back in a minute." With that, the shadows pooled around them both and they vanished, leaving the remaining 3 with a lot of cleanup duty. Hidden cave inside Hokage Monument. Naruto appeared in a dark room inside the cave. He left Hogback with the still-living Zaraki Kenpachi. He yelled out and his voice carried throughout the entire cave system, "Hogback!" Within a few seconds the doctor appeared at the doorway, somewhat out of breath, and managed to get out. "Yes, pant Naruto-sama?" Naruto looked up from patching up the unconscious Zaraki as best he could and said, "Get me that swordsman general zombie that you cooked up and make sure that he's restrained. This guy won't last too much longer, so you had better put a rush on that." Hogback nodded and dashed off as best he could. Within the next few minutes Naruto did his best to keep Zaraki alive through moving the nearby shadows to literally patch up Zaraki's wounds. It stopped the external bleeding but not much else. He had to keep him alive until Hogback got there with the only general class zombie he had completed. It was meant for a sword-wielding shadow, which was a bonus. Worst case scenario, they had to put it in a soldier zombie and transplant the shadow later. Hogback arrived, pulling a wheeled cart with a frozen body after him. This body was much stronger than any other zombie thus far, and had the tattoo upon his upper arm G2. The body was strapped to the table with thick circles of iron that ensnared the corpse at knee, waist, and bicep level. Hogback pulled the cart near the body while Naruto got up. With a single hand seal, he created a Kage Bunshin. This clone moved toward Zaraki's feet and hurriedly lifted up the shadow from the ground. Naruto moved quickly and removed a recent acquisition from the shadow in the sleeve opposite the sleeve that held his axe. This new acquisition was an extremely large pair of scissors. He quickly cut Zaraki's shadow from his person, and the clone, without any ceremony, simply pressed the shadow against the body, and let go and vanished once the shadow sank in. Naruto quickly took a brush and some ink from within his coat and quickly sketched a complex seal onto the torso of the zombie. He had to work fast to secure the shadow before Zaraki died. If the seal didn't anchor the shadow to the body before he died, the shadow would go with the original owner. As a result, Naruto worked faster than he ever did before, drawing frantically and making hand seals as quickly as possible. He was overjoyed when the symbols glowed blue and shrank into a space the size of the head of a pin thanks to another seal he included in the design. Naruto collapsed onto the ground. He was so fucking glad. It could not be expressed in words. He was actually surprised that he made it. He was glad the scissors did their job. They cut through the shadow a lot easier than the axe did. Plus, it didn't leave large indentations in the floor. He would use the axe to take shadows in battle, but if he had some calm, he would use the scissors to cut the bonds between shadow and body. He looked up and said, "Thank you, doctor. Now then, we should give our friend here some space. We both know that zombies won't be immediately obedient. I will take care of Zaraki's body. Keep up the good work." Hogback nodded and wheeled away the body, which was starting to move. Naruto got up and with a few hand seals incinerated the body with a Gukkaku no Jutsu. He left the same way he came, vanishing into the shadows. Back at the campsite or battlefield depends on your point of view. When he got back, he saw that the bodies of the genin were incinerated. The tents and sleeping gear and everything else were already sealed into a scroll and they were all waiting for him. After a second to get his bearings, he stood before them and said, "My friends, I believe it is now time for me to reveal my most powerful tactical maneuver." They all looked at him oddly, and with some degree of anxiety. If it was as powerful as he said it was, it must have been something, right? He continued on, "Yes, my most secret maneuver. It is aptly named Operation Get the Fuck Out of Here." He started to run into the forest, the others hurrying after him. 2 hours and 10 miles later, they came to a stop in a decent-sized clearing where Naruto stopped and said, "Right, this should be far enough." They all stopped and panted slightly, Haruka glaring at him. He continued on, "Sorry about the suspense and the sudden run, but we needed to get as far away from there as possible, plus the mood needed lightening up. Fighting and killing one of the 7 swordsmen takes its toll." He gave them a moment to catch their breath and stop panting before he continued before saying, "Right, now that we are here, Yukino, I need you to do your best to locate Perona. The rest of you can do what you want. I can smell a stream not too far from here, so I am going to try my hand at catching breakfast. Again, build a fire while I'm gone." Then he walked into the forest. By the time Naruto got back, with a skewer of fish in hand, Yukino had already done her job. When Naruto had finished prepping the fish to cook and set them before the fire, he asked her, "Well, did you find her?" Yukino sat down and said to him, "Well, there is good news and there is bad news. Which do you want first?" Naruto looked at her and said, "Let's hear the good news, why not?" Yukino nodded and continued on, the others hanging on her every word. "The good news is that I did find Perona." She was cut off by Haruka yelling out, "Nice job, Yukino-chan," which made Yukino blush a bit. Naruto interjected into the moment and said, "And the bad news?" Yukino looked at him and said, "The bad news is that she is sealed." Naruto looked at her and asked, "Sealed?" Yukino nodded and looked at the frying fish and said, "Yes, into a jar." Naruto was getting slightly irritated when he asked, "Okay, where's this jar?" She looked up from the fish and gave him the bad news, plain and simple. The vase is locked into a safe behind a portrait. This portrait is in the office of Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni, the Yondaime Mizukage. Naruto said only one word, and it summarized the entire situation, fuck. Summary of last chapter. Naruto and the rest successfully infiltrated Mizu no Kuni. They had made camp when they were discovered by Zaraki Kenpachi, one of the 7 swordmen, plus his genin team through complete accident. When the smoke cleared, the 3 Kiri genin were dead, and Zaraki himself was kept alive long enough to have his shadow removed and sealed into a general zombie, creating a powerful servant for Naruto to command since zombies possess all of the abilities the original owners of the shadows had. After they had gotten far away from the battleground, Yukino actually managed to locate Perona. However, she was sealed into a jar, like the jar they sealed Shikaku in before sealing it into Gaara. That jar was in a safe behind a portrait in the office of Yamamoto Genryusai Shigakuni, the Yonde Mizukage. And now we begin. The clearing where we left off. Naruto summed up the entire situation in one word: fuck. This was bad and he knew it. He never planned to go within 50 miles of Kirigakure on this trip. Now he not only had to infiltrate the office of one of the most powerful men in the world, but he had to do it in a damn short time limit. He would have to get into and out of Kirigakure before they found out about Zaraki's death. The moment they found out about it, the entire village would be sealed up tighter than a camel's nostril in a sandstorm for quite some time while they tried to find the people responsible, in other words Naruto, Yukino, Haruka, and Absalom. He gave out the order immediately after the fish were cooked and eaten. Pack up, we're moving out now. Knowing that they wouldn't be told what he had in mind until he wanted to or needed to tell them, they just did as they were told, and after removing any traces of their presence, ran off into the forest. Naruto kept the pace quick and brutal. No stopping, even for a moment. It was keep up or get left behind. Naruto may have been rather young, but the boy was a fast little bastard. They went a lot faster than they did after the battle. They weren't extremely hungry for one, plus they didn't have to go slower than normal to cover their tracks from anyone who might have been pursuing them. Naruto went as fast as he could through the chilling, mist-filled woods, heading steadily eastward the entire way. After 6 hours of non-stop running, they finally stopped about 10 miles outside of Kirigakure. This was much closer than Naruto ever wanted to go to a hidden village on this trip, but circumstances demanded some alterations to many plans. He told them to get some rest, and for Yukino to place a genjutsu around them before she did. He quickly unsealed the tents and everyone slept the sleep of the completely exhausted once Yukino shielded them from prying eyes and ears. Exactly 8 hours later, Naruto woke up at 3 a.m. exactly. Having a bijou acting as your alarm clock was a pretty handy fringe benefit of being a Jinchuriki. He woke up the other three in the usual way, i.e. cold water. Once they were awake and calmed down a bit, he told them what was going through his mind once he heard of Perona's unfortunate location. I am not going to lie to you, I did consider this possibility when we entered Mizu no Kuni. This is the second worst possible scenario that I had envisioned, that Perona had already been found and captured by Kirigakure, or some other hidden village. We need to secure that container and we have to do it fast. Once the Mizukage hears of Zaraki's disappearance, he will be forced to launch an investigation. It will be 2 days at most before they come to the conclusion that Zaraki is either dead or has gone rogue. In either case, the village itself will be put on total lockdown due to a major security breach. The seven swordsmen know more about Kirigakure and Mizu no Kuni's defenses than anyone save the Mizukage and the daimyo themselves, and if one of them went rogue or was killed, the swordsman or his killers would automatically receive a kill on sight order plus an S rank in the Kiri Bingo book for either stealing important village secrets or killing one of the seven. If we are going to have any chance whatsoever of obtaining Perona's container within the next year, we have to do it now. Do you understand? If we miss this chance, the village will be damn near impenetrable for God only knows how long, and the security will be tightened immediately afterward for quite a long time. We do not have a second chance. Do you understand? They nodded and said, yes, Naruto-san/Sama. Naruto continued on, good. Now then, no matter what, we are not going to engage any Kiri ninja. The only time you should attack anyone is if that person finds out what we are here for, or you are laying down cover fire for our eventual escape. This is a stealth operation, no violence whatsoever unless absolutely necessary. We are also going to avoid the Mizukage at all costs. The last damn thing we need is one of the Kages coming after us. Well, fighting us, he will definitely come after us once he realizes what we have stolen, but we do not want a confrontation with him. At this point in time, Yamamoto would rip us apart. The moment we obtain Perona's container, we are getting as far away from here as possible. If possible, I don't want anyone dying either on either side. We are here as thieves, not assassins. Besides, killing someone leaves way too much evidence of our passing. Now then, Yukino-chan, I need you to scout out the village in its entirety. Leave nothing out, every sewer entrance, every abandoned building, any place that would be useful as a rendezvous point. Pay special attention to the gates, ANBU patrols, and the Mizukage Tower. Also make sure to scout out the inside of the Mizukage Tower, every guard post, every camera, and every possible hiding place and get it all down onto a map. Absalom, I will need you to infiltrate the village. Yukino can only do so much, so I will entrust the stalking of the Mizukage to you. Don't get too close to him. Just discreetly follow him. Most importantly, find out when he is guaranteed to be away from the tower. Understand? They nodded. Good. Haruka, you guard Yukino. Absalom, you had better get going. Before Absalom left, he asked, what will you be doing, Naruto-sama? Naruto looked at the beast man and said, I will do my best to get inside the village. If I can manage it, we will have a guaranteed way to enter Kirigakure, making this operation much easier as well as leaving a back door into the village if for any reason we ever need to come back. Now get going. I told you already, we are on a time limit. I want to be out of here with Perona in tow by this time tomorrow. Absalom then scurried off and Yukino went to work. Naruto took a deep breath and went to attempt his infiltration. Kirigakure main gate. Most people underestimate this, but infiltrating any hidden village is fucking difficult. Kirigakure had 3 gates, a main gate that opened to the east and smaller, less used gates to the north and south. There was no entrance from the west. Beyond that wall was the sea and nothing more. Each of the 3 gates was guarded by 2 full squads of Chunin, 8 ninja in total, plus a jounin was a call away should a powerful intruder appear. There were also several ways to trigger the village alarms at each gate should something severe show up, such as an army. Each and every visitor to the gates fell into one of 3 categories: shinobi, enemy, or civilian. Friendly Kiri shinobi, after getting their identification checked and their mission verified, were let in without a second thought. Enemy shinobi were killed on sight or captured. Civilians, on the other hand, were checked carefully. You couldn't just wander into one of the hidden villages. You had to have a purpose. If you were a merchant looking to buy or sell goods, you and your goods were thoroughly checked before you were given a temporary citizenship that lasted for a month. Once that expired, you had 1 day to pack your stuff and get out. People who came to offer a mission to the village were escorted to the Mizukage Tower by one of the Chunin guards. After that, the client-to-be was interviewed by a Chunin to get the mission specs down and give a price estimation. After that, the person would be escorted to a group of rooms in the tower and were ordered to stay there while their mission was evaluated, the final price was negotiated, and ninja of the appropriate rank were chosen to do the job. People intending to move into and gain citizenship inside a hidden village were warily granted some time to choose a house and apply for said citizenship, and basically get everything settled. Once everything was said and done and the citizenship was granted, a house bought, a job secured, and everything was settled down, the person in question was watched during this entire process by ANBU and would continue to be watched for a probation period of somewhere between 1 and 2 years afterward to make sure that they weren't spies. It was an effective system, and it was what most hidden villages did when it came to visitors and new residents. It also came with the benefit of being hard as hell to break into. After carefully scouting out each of the gates, Naruto decided that the main gate was the best bet. A lot more people went through there every day, so it would be easier to hide among the crowd and sneak in inside of a cart or something. He had no chance in hell of getting in officially. He didn't have any of the papers required for something like that. Getting in wouldn't be easy by any means. He watched the security procedures carefully. There were 4 ninja at the gate itself, 4 more were on top of the thing watching for possible incoming enemies, and an ANBU patrol stopped by every 30 minutes. There were also ninja patrolling the walls at random, watching the areas the men on the gate couldn't see and checking up on the place in general. He decided that his best chance was to stow along in another person's group. How to do this, however, was presenting a bit of a problem. His best chance was to wait for a merchant convoy of a decent size and cling to the bottom of a cart, using a powerful genjutsu to hide himself from sight during this time, combined with using the natural cloaking effect the shadows provided him. A plan decided upon, Naruto left the gate, heading down the road. If he was going to pull this off, it wouldn't be in plain sight of a few more than a half a dozen Chunin. About 2 miles down the road, 30 minutes later, Naruto was crouching in the bushes, stiff as a board, and just as cold. A little less than half an hour had gone by since he started scouting out a good stowaway target, but there was absolutely no one. His thoughts were going by, what the hell? This is supposed to be the busiest road for miles. Where the fuck is everybody? The only person to go by since I got here was that pair of newlyweds going to Kiri for their damn honeymoon. I hope the fucking bride snaps her neck falling down some stairs or something. Come on. Naruto ended up waiting another hour and a half before a merchant with a cart showed up that Naruto could stow away on. 2 hours, combined with it being Mizu no Kuni in the later months of the year, the temperature was getting closer to the bottom of the thermostat. Disregarding his near miss with hypothermia, Naruto snuck by the old geezer guiding the horse pulling the cart, got underneath it and sticking to the thing with chakra channeled into his back, placed a genjutsu around himself that would hopefully sneak by the damn locals, wrapped himself in shadows for a combination of good measure and warmth and settled in for a good, long ride under massive scrutiny in mid-30-degree weather. Kirigakure, Merchant's Quarter, 2 hours later. Naruto climbed out from under the dude's cart and managed to get away without being seen. Why it took 2 bloody hours to get a cart across roughly 3 miles of space was beyond him. Now the guy in question was in some cheap hotel looking for a room, so Naruto decided to take the opportunity to get the hell out of there while the going was good. Through a powerful genjutsu that would be difficult by the standards of most jounin, he managed to get people to think he was a poor abandoned orphan. Not too far from the truth, mind you, but he didn't carry the look of abused youth most of the time under normal circumstances. There was one good thing about this entire mission, and that was the fact that the Mizukage Tower, like all Kage towers, could be seen from like 5 miles away. With target in sight, Naruto got moving. About an hour later, Naruto slipped into a back alley. Things were getting dangerous. It was a fucking swarm of ninja of all levels near the tower. Hell, he came within 20 feet of Ikamaru Jin himself, one of the now 2 remaining loyal members of the 7 Swordsmen. He was lucky as all hell that the man didn't sense the genjutsu, but he did look to have something on his mind at the time. At the moment, Naruto was trying to get as close to the tower as possible before he got out of dodge. At the moment, he was about 300 meters from the wall separating the tower from the street, and you couldn't swing a cat without hitting a ninja at the moment. They must have gotten the news of Zaraki's disappearance sooner than he thought. Oh well, he reasoned. This only means that I have to work faster. He stepped away from the alley and did his best to slowly, and most importantly stealthily, make his way to the tower. He didn't have a snowball's chance in hell of making it inside the wall without blowing his cover, but a starting point near the tower would be good for the operation. He was about 150 meters from the wall now, so close. If he could make it to 100 meters, it would be perfect. Well, this whole situation was far from perfect, so it would have been as good as he could possibly hope for. Just a little bit closer. He crept out of the alleyway very carefully, doing his best to remain unnoticed by the locals who seemed to have more important matters than some little brat. He was about 2 meters from the next alley when he heard it, the muffled sound of hand seals and a muttered kai, and he felt the illusion around him disperse. Shit. He thought as he scrambled to get away from the people whose sole attention now rested on him. He managed to get into the alley unscathed and with a quickly muttered Kagehoko, managed to escape before he got killed. He managed to get a look at the person who found him out though. It was Tosen Kaname, Kiri's blind swordsman and the other loyal survivor of the 7 swordsmen. The campsite. Naruto emerged from the shadows in the middle of the camp, breathing hard. That was way too close for comfort. If he didn't hear the guy before the illusion dispersed, well, let's not get into that. He looked around frantically and saw Yukino with a large screen composed of mirrors displaying numerous flashing images. She said to him as he got his bearings, "You had a very close call there, Naruto-sama." He looked over at the girl and asked, "You saw it then?" She nodded and said, "Yes, you managed to reach your goal, but Tosen Kaname spotted you. Ironic that it would be the blind man to find what no one else could see. Absalom is still tracking the Mizukage and he has remained undetected. His talents are really quite useful." Naruto nodded and said, "Of course they are, that's why I recruited him. How are you coming on that map of the city and the tower blueprints?" She didn't even glance away from the mirrors and he noticed for the first time a scroll and ink brush in her hand. An inkwell was nearby, as was a second scroll that seemed to be completed already. She said, "The map of the city with all information you requested has already been completed." She indicated the scroll near the inkwell before continuing, "The blueprints of the tower, however, are still being completed." She didn't even look away from the mirrors or blink, as she inscribed another passageway on the scroll in her hand. adding several symbols that indicated guard posts. Naruto reached down and took the completed scroll. He looked it over and it was extremely accurate to what he had seen in the city. He could trace his steps on the parchment from the gate to the alley where he made his disappearing act. Yukino had some real talent as a calligrapher. There wasn't a stray splotch of ink or a wobbling line anywhere on the thing. It could have been made by a computer. There were clear indications of guard posts as well as side notes that indicated how strong the guards were. Dotted lines indicating ANBU patrol paths as well as how long it took the squad in question to complete one circuit of said path. Every place not frequented by the public and out-of-the-way spots that could be useful was also noted. It was an impressive piece of work and he told her as such. She just nodded, not even looking away from the mirrors as she continued to draw upon the scroll in her hands. Absalom returned an hour later, just after Yukino completed the scroll. He gave them an approximation of the Mizukage schedule. He was in the tower taking care of paperwork and other managerial duties such as assigning missions, overseeing the training of new ANBU, and other such duties of a Kage. The only times he wasn't in the tower was during some kind of festival when he went home for the day or on a rare day off. According to Naruto's calendar, there wasn't any sort of celebration planned for at least 8 months, and the guy took a day off once every 5 or 10 years or so if the rumors were true. Therefore, the only shot they had of getting into the office while Yamamoto wasn't there was during the late night or extremely early morning. Either that or cause a large enough distraction to demand the Kage's personal attention. He took the newly completed blueprint from Yukino and got to work on planning the heist. 1 hour later, after examining the blueprints and the maps, he had managed to come up with a plan. Given time, he probably could have come up with a better one, but he was pressed for time. He called the others close and unrolled the maps Yukino had drawn before beginning his briefing. Okay, our main goal is the jar in the safe, which is in the Mizukage's office here. He put a circle around the room. Now, if you look closely you will see that with the pattern of guards they have set up, plus the arrangement of cameras in the tower, it is impossible to get near or into the office without being seen by somebody unless you are completely invisible. Take a hint, Absalom. Moving on, we still have the major obstacle that the Mizukage himself provides. He is currently in his office doing damage control on one of the 7 going missing. We need to get him the hell away from the tower before we even think of going into that office. Naruto took a small break and reached into his jacket, pulling out a bar of chocolate, which he unwrapped and bit into. Geez, he may be strong and smart, but he's still a damn kid. Sweet Tooth, the size of a monster, thought Haruka rather cynically. Though it was true, her commander had an enormous sweet tooth and always had some kind of candy on his person or nearby. 1. He continued on, our best bet therefore is to create a distraction large enough to demand the Mizukage's personal attention. The slaughter of a clan would do, but that was already done by the Sandame Mizukage, one Aizen Sosuke before Yamamoto deposed him and took over. I believe that our current best bet is to take out this particular target. He circled a large building near the wall, far away from any housing. The power plant, if we take that out, the entire city will go through an enormous blackout. This will cause the Mizukage to leave and go with several Jounin and ANBU to find out what's going on. This normally wouldn't have the procedure, but with the high alert status they're under right now, he won't take any chances, most likely believing it to be a rogue Zaraki or his killers. Well, he is right on that one, but moving on. I will take care of the power plant. After I do, I will bring Absalom to the tower to begin his infiltration. Without power, the cameras won't be active, so it will be a lot easier. I will also place a barrier around the tower to prevent reinforcements. Yukino, Haruka, you two are to stay here. We will come back for you once we have the target. Okay. It is currently 6:30 p.m., just getting dark, so the lights should start coming on any minute. Absalom, we had better get going. The beast man nodded and rose, the boy following him. Naruto looked back at the 2 girls and said, get everything ready to leave at a second's notice. The moment we get back, we are getting out of here. The girls nodded and Naruto grabbed Absalom's shoulder. He muttered Kagehoku, and they were gone. Kirigakure, merchant's quarter. The pair emerged in an alley behind the hotel where the merchant from earlier was staying. The moment they were there, Naruto muttered to Absalom, right, you saw the map? Get us there unseen. Absalom nodded and placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Within seconds they had both vanished. Absalom could become almost completely undetectable and render anything he was touching as such alongside him. They followed the memorized map, not moving too quickly so that they could remain undetected. Within an hour, they stood before the power plant. It was an impressive sight, big stone building, surrounded by gate complete with barbed wire, and the odd ANBU patrol made sure the place was safe. Naruto got close to the gate and held out his hand. This was close enough. Darkness gathered in his palm, seemingly materializing from nowhere. What Absalom didn't know was that this was the shadow of the air itself. It wasn't much, but it was there and at Naruto's disposal. When the sphere got as big as his hand, he let it go. It soared into the air above the facility and spread, cloaking the entire building. Within a few seconds, the lights in the city began going out. Naruto muttered under his breath, "If you snuff it, they shall come." He waited 5 minutes for the Kage to get his old ass out of the tower. When Naruto saw him approaching from the other side of the street, he grabbed Absalom and vanished the same way they came. They were in the alley where Naruto vanished earlier. They looked around carefully, still invisible thanks to Absalom, and there were very few people in the darkness. Absalom had the eyes of an animal so he could see in the dark, and Naruto had naturally perfect night vision. Nice fringe benefit of his abilities. They quickly made their way to the tower. Naruto kept up a constant vigil. He wasn't afraid of the Mizukage, he was out of the picture, but there was a very real chance of encountering one of the remaining 2 members of the 7 swordsmen. Naruto did the same thing to the tower that he did to the power plant, only this time the dome covered the 2 of them as well, locking out any reinforcements no matter how strong they were, well, to a certain extent. Naruto muttered to Absalom, "Okay, nice, quiet, and slow. We don't want anyone knowing we're here until it's too late. The office is on the 3rd floor, so take the steps on your left." Absalom only nodded. The main trick was getting the door open without telling them that you were there. This was impossible, so they just opened the door naturally. There was a pair of ninja waiting for them, Chunin, that reacted to the opening of the door. A flicker of shadow blocked the projectiles the ninja threw in the direction of the door, and with a few hand seals and a muttering of Doton, Shinjuzanshu no Jutsu, he was gone. Only to reappear a few seconds later to drag the pair under the ground, including the nose and mouth. They would suffocate in the earth's embrace, and he didn't give a damn. He nodded to Absalom and said, "Let's go," before dashing up the stairs, Absalom close behind him. They moved quickly but quietly up flights of stairs and through numerous hallways, going upon Naruto's memorized map to get them to the right place. With the deactivation of the cameras in the building plus Absalom's invisibility, they got the drop on most of the guards. The only exception were those few that had extremely good hearing. Absalom's ability was invisibility, not inhearability after all. They eventually managed to get to the Mizukage's office without any injuries, though there were plenty of fatalities on the opponent's side. The janitors would have their work cut out for them, I will say no more. Naruto, without ceremony or patience, just kicked down the door and jumped in. He knew that Yamamoto was at the barrier he put around the tower, trying to break in. He could feel the heat of his techniques against the infinitely cold darkness Ha placed around the building. He was amazed that the old man got there so fast. They both ransacked the room, looking for the portrait behind which the safe laid hidden. The only problem was that portraits covered most of the damn walls. He mentioned to Absalom as they searched, "Hey, don't you find it weird that the Mizukage, the leader of the hidden village of Mizu no Kuni, Water Country, is a master of fire techniques?" Absalom checked behind another painting. "No luck." "I know what you mean, it's exactly like Konoha's Naidame Hokage. The leader of the village that was located in Hai no Kuni, Fire Country, was perhaps the most powerful master of water techniques ever. Honestly, it makes me wonder if some of them were adopted or something." Naruto just nodded before turning over another painting, revealing a metal box. Found it." Absalom looked over and moved to inspect the box. He murmured to himself after a second, "This is a pretty good design. Damn near impossible to crack the code." Naruto looked over, slightly worried. "You mean you can't get into it?" He was rather irritated to go all that way only to not be able to enter a small metal box. Absalom laughed for the first time in Naruto's presence. It was rather odd. A deep bestial, gururururu. "He got out though, of course I can get into it. I just said I couldn't crack the code." Naruto looked a bit puzzled. "What do you mean by that, Abdash?" he would have continued, but he was interrupted by Absalom pointing his left hand at the box and shouting, "Dead man's hand." A minute later we had one blown open box and a charred wall. Naruto looked horrified. "Are you insane? You could have damaged the target, you moron." He looked into the box. Thank God, he thought. It was there. A medium-sized ceramic jar covered with seals about the size of his head. He grabbed the thing without preempt, turned to Absalom and said, "It's time to go." Absalom nodded, and a gripped shoulder and a kagehoko later, they were at the campsite. Rinse and repeat, and they were in the series of tunnels hidden deep inside the Hokage mountain where they left Hogback. Naruto sat down against the wall and just sighed as he patted the jar affectionately. Thank God that's over? Absalom and the rest, after getting used to their surroundings, nodded. Hogback, hearing the noise, walked into the room and asked, "Ah, is that you, Naruto-sama? Ah, you're all back. How was the search for Perona? Did you manage to find her?" Naruto looked at the odd-looking doctor for a second before cracking a genuine smile for the first time in a long time. Yes, we did. It was a pain in the ass, but we finally managed it. There will still be some difficulties, but the hardest part is over. How is the new general coming along, Hogback? Hogback smiled before saying, "Excellently, Naruto-sama. It is just as you said. He holds nothing but complete loyalty to you. Well, once the personality and memories left behind by the Shadow's original owner vanished anyway. Before that he was quite unstable. Oh, by the way, Naruto-sama, shouldn't you release Perona? I don't think she enjoys confinement too much." Naruto looked at the jar and realized that he had almost forgotten that there was a person in there. He just said, "Well, here we go guys, moment of truth, before he ripped off the seals and yanked off the lid. The moment he did, an eerie mist flooded from the jar and filled the room. From that mist they heard a very strange laugh. A high-pitched, horo-ho-horo-horo-horo. Summary of last chapter. Naruto and company broke into the office of the Mizukage and stole the jar containing Perona in a carefully planned heist, making an excellent getaway back to the caves hidden in the Hokage monument where they left Hogback, where they released said seals and released the ghost princess. Now we must see what Naruto will offer the centuries-old immaterial being that is doubtlessly pissed off at being sealed up to keep her from killing him and getting her to work for him. Let's find out. Hokage Monument, Hidden Caves. A blast of mist erupted from the newly opened jar and engulfed the room. They could hear a strange sound from somewhere within the mist. A high-pitched, horo-ho-horo-horo-horo. Absalom and Hogback recognized it though. After all, they were the only people still alive that could identify Perona's unique laugh. They heard a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. "So, you finally decided to let me go, you stupid old man? I can't believe you trusted me enough to do so. But let me just say you just made your last mistake." Then came the words that Absalom and Hogback hoped they would never hear directed at them, negative hollow. Ghosts appeared from nothingness and rammed through the occupants of the room who were too slow to dodge them. In other words, everyone save Naruto. He managed to duck aside from the speeding apparition. He saw the others get nailed though. Yukino fell to her knees in tears, muttering, "I got off too lightly. I deserve the hate that everyone has always given me and much more than that. I don't deserve happiness, or love or care, much less Haruka-chan's." Haruka just fell over muttering, "I deserve to die. If I am reincarnated, I hope I am a worm. Who am I to act all high and mighty to everyone else when I myself am so cowardly and weak?" Absalom fell to his knees saying, "I apologize for walking on the same ground as everyone else." Hogback fell onto his back sobbing, "Why am I still alive? I should have died years ago. Who was I to prevent it? I wish I could go back in time and prevent myself from ever being born." Naruto watched this in shock. Her abilities were fucking scary. He looked around in the dispersing mist for the woman-turned-ghost responsible, taking a scroll out of his coat at the same time. He called out, "What old man are you talking about? No one here qualifies as old, except maybe Hogback and Absalom." This was the major reason he wanted those two to be here. If he was lucky, the sight of old acquaintances might make her more willing to talk. The voice returned and he could see a floating shadow at the other side of the room, as far away from the jar as possible. "Hogback? Absalom? Those two died centuries ago. How do you know of them?" He called out, They're still alive and well through Hogback's medical skill. They're right here in this room. The mist dispersed a little more, allowing him to see some detail of the spirit. The voice returned, "Oh my God! You're right. Hora 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 horo. Who would have guessed I would see you two again? I see the old man isn't here, so who are you, boy?" The mist was almost gone and he could see some features, but the figure was still mostly cloaked. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I am the current employer of Absalom and Hogback. They work for me as they worked for Gecko Moria long ago. I want to offer you the same deal." "Who is the old man you're talking about?" The mist still shrouded the figure. "You know who I mean. The old man with all those scars and the long beard tied with purple ribbons. He managed to distract me while those other men put me in that horrid jar." Speaking of which, Mini Hollow, a very small ghost, soared from the figure, and when it neared the jar, he heard her snap her fingers just before the ghost exploded and annihilated the piece of ceramic along with a good chunk of the wall. The voice continued on, "Now, where is the old man? And most importantly, why should I work for you? I have enjoyed being free, and I have no intention of returning to servitude. Moria promised me my own country to get me to work for him, so what do you offer?" The mist cleared completely and he finally managed to get a decent view of her. She was lying horizontally in midair with her head resting in her right hand. She had a tall, thin figure, and she was probably around 5 feet 10 inches. Her hair was a light pink and was tied in 2 tails that would fall to her shoulder blades. She wore a white t-shirt with a winged skull and crossbones upon it, the flag of the long-sunk Thriller bark. The shirt had long sleeves that came to her wrists. The shirt itself only reached her below her ribs, revealing her stomach. She wore a red mantle that fell around her shoulders that was secured by a large pink bow. She also wore a pink miniskirt with a belt whose buckle was a large pink heart and had black and white stripped leggings that ran down her legs. Her feet were covered by knee-length red boots that were secured by several buckles. Upon her head was a black and red crown with a black cross adorning the top in the style of Old English rulers. Her eyes, however, were highly memorable. In fact, he could only think of one other person that had eyes like hers, and he was a strange boy by the name of Lee. Unlike that talentless guy though, they actually looked good on her. 1. Naruto continued on, "In return for your service, I can give you what you lost." A smirk graced her features. "Oh, and what might that be? I don't believe I have lost anything." Naruto went on, "Really? You don't want the ability to touch again? To smell? To taste? When you abandoned your body Perona, you lost the ability to interact with physical objects. I am willing to give that back." Perona looked struck for a moment before her features turned to anger. Naruto saw, though, in her eyes behind the anger, a bit of hope. "What do you know about me, boy?" "Nothing. I don't know what you offered Hogback and Absalom to get them to work for you, but I am not taken so easily. How would you even give me such things back anyways? My body rotted long ago. The only thing left of it is the dust that my bones became. Who are you to talk down to me?" She contained her anger, but Naruto knew the cause of that anger. Her anger was caused by the pain of Naruto reminding her of what she lost when she gave up her body. She was forced to remember that which she lost and dearly wanted back. She probably hadn't thought about such things in centuries. He opened old wounds and she hated him for it. Her voice tapered off near the end, becoming airy, seductive, and extremely dangerous. This was his chance. If he made the wrong move, she would obliterate him, and he knew it. Naruto slowly unrolled the scroll and placed his hand upon the large symbol inscribed upon it. He just prayed that this worked. From the symbol came a puff of smoke, and when the smoke vanished, where there was once a scroll was now a human-sized object. This object was completely white, and though it held a human shape, it had no features. If you stiffened the limbs, it could have been a shop mannequin. Naruto looked at the ghost before him, who asked, hope withering, and anger and pain rising, "What is this?" Naruto talked fast. "It is a body that I have modified to be able to host any soul. If you possess this like you would when you once returned to your physical body, it will take on your features and clothing without a single flaw. It may not be your body, but it will be an exact copy of your body. This is your only chance to regain what you lost, to smell, to taste, to touch, to become human again. You won't even age, it will remain young forever. This in exchange for your service. I will even throw in revenge against the man who sealed you into the bargain." Do we have a deal? The ghost girl looked hesitant. She couldn't believe her change of fortune. As far as she was concerned, she was trapped in a very small space for who knows how long. Then she is suddenly released and practically given what she has been looking for so long. She decided to take the risk and said, "You have a deal," before she dived into the body. Naruto watched as his experiment did its work. The features shifted into those of its host as he just saw her, clothes and crown included. Before long, he was looking at a black and white version of Perona before color filled the form. The eyes fluttered open. She felt the rock under her hand, and a look of pure joy graced her features as he heard the moans of misery die off. The negativity was wearing off. He walked over and whispered into Perona's ear. "You see? I won't betray you, ever. I have given you back what you lost, the ability to taste, to smell, to touch." He leaned down and kissed her on the cheek, and to be touched. "You can trust me." He got up and left the now blushing girl behind as he explored the caves. He hadn't been in there in a while. The others eventually got over themselves. Perona's debilitating ghosts only lasted for a minute or two. Absalom and Hogback, however, saw what the girls didn't since they recovered first. They had felt it before, what Perona could do when she got pissed off, so they had a bit of tolerance, and they saw Naruto convince Perona to join them, and what he did afterward. Absalom sported a lecherous grin before he sang to himself, "Perona's got a boyfriend. Perona's got a boyfriend." This was the wrong thing to say, however, as he quickly rejoined the XIWA ninja on the floor and crying, though they were beginning to pull themselves together. Hogback left the room to the girls and Absalom, smiling once the recovering Perona couldn't see him. He knew what Naruto was playing at. Inspiring loyalty by making a girl love you. Very clever, Naruto-sama. Perona has never had a boyfriend before, so she will be easy prey for someone with enough caring and good enough looks. Hogback was no fool, and he knew that every move the young man made was intentional. He might be too young for such a relationship now, but he is still good-looking for his age and could probably win over the most icy of hearts given some time to grow. He would be quite handsome in his teens and early 20s if his previous encounters with children were correct. And something told the doctor that Perona would not be the first woman won over by such methods. He thought to himself as he walked into his lab: actor, shadow master, ninja, homeowner, recruiter, scientist, army commander, dictator, and now a seducer. What occupation shall you take next, Naruto-sama? Konoha Main Gate. It was finally time for Naruto to return to Hell on Earth, in other words, Konohagakure. To some it was the place of nightmares, to others the place of their dreams. 1 full year had passed since Naruto left the village under the pretenses of a training trip on his own. All the while he was supposed to be watched by ANBU, though what the ANBU were truly watching was his shadow given physical form and specific orders not to do anything suspicious. While he had spent the first few months recruiting members to his budding organization, each with a specific purpose in mind, he had never really planned much after finding Perona. He had never thought that he would find the 3 enigmas so quickly. That was all thanks to Yukino-chan and her unique abilities. As a result, he had spent the remaining months training in the caves of the Hogake Mountain and the last few months traveling in Rai no Kuni and Kaze no Kuni, killing the reasonably strong in order to provide Hogback with the most powerful people to transform into marionettes for General Zombies, and obtaining shadows in order to animate the completed creations of the ancient doctor. The results of it all was that his growing army of undead had grown from around 50 soldier-class zombies and 1 general-class zombie, along with Rei and Hilden, who were not meant for combat, to around 100 soldier-class zombies and 5 general-class zombies. He had also rented out some of his soldier-class zombies to people like Gatu for a large sum of money each month, going from poor orphan with a large building in his name to an orphan with an extremely large amount of money stored in various dummy accounts in several different banks. His creations were generally used rarely by those he rented them to, and they had the sense to not let anyone see them and live. They could not die and had the skills of powerful ninja, so they were powerful warriors. He had underestimated his creature's true abilities since he had forgotten that the zombie retained the abilities of the one whose shadow he possessed. As a result, his original 50, which had the shadows of Caught ANBU mostly from the Na division, had the tactics and jutsu of Na ANBU. The newer ones had shadows of similar people, ninja that he had encountered and subdued in various countries. The generals had the shadows of powerful A or B-class ninja that had stood out among their peers: Zaraki Kenpachi, Rokishu Aoi, Kurasuki Raiga, Fuma Kamakiri, and Fuma Jigimo. Those were the 5 whose shadows he had used to bring his strongest creations to life. 2 of them were members of the 7 swordsmen, unencountered in Kiri, 1 encountered on the road and captured after killing the boy who attempted to assist him. Rokashu Aoi, who had been made a jounin of Amigakure after defecting from Konoha, wielder of the Nidaime Hokage's Raijin sword, defeated and allowed to keep the sword that he had grown used to using now that he was no longer living. The last 2 were jounin of the once great Fuma clan, defeated together by himself and his allies. Their 3rd teammate, Fuma Kajiro, would have joined them if she had not used a jutsu that ended up killing her in an attempt to save them. As a result, she joined the ranks of the zombies as a body, a marionette, rather than an animating shadow. The beautiful girl now served as Hogback's assistant and is the 3rd zombie not made for combat. Yes, his army had grown. Even more impressive were the bodies that had been constructed for them. Some of them were an amalgam of parts, specifically the 3 that had gone to Aoi and the Fuma clan members. The 2 that went to the shadows of the 7 swordsmen were much more powerful. The body that he had animated with the shadow of Kurisuki Raiga was in fact the body of the Nidaime Hokage that he had stolen and replaced. He did the same with the Shodaime Hokage, but he had not found a shadow for that body yet. The Yondaime Hokage's body remained in the Hokage's tomb. He didn't want anything to do with the man or his corpse. The genius of the placement of Raiga's shadow was in the fact that the Nidaime was a master of water techniques, and that carried on even in death. Combined with Raiga's mastery of lightning, the pairing of body and shadow was extremely potent in this case, more powerful than the Nidaime had been in his prime since, although he had to relearn his water abilities, his body had been strengthened beforehand by Hogback. By surgically making the body more powerful, more durable, and more resistant to damage, stronger and faster, he had enabled the new zombie to surpass the Nidaime's human limits. The immensely powerful Sway-Tun Jutsu of the Nidaime Hokage combined with the immense Rai-Tun abilities of Kurisuki Raiga, Kiri's Lightning Fong, and armed with Raiga's swords, it was an extremely powerful warrior, albeit with morbid tendencies and a love of funerals. The body that was animated by Zaraki Kenpachi, however, was as good a matchup. Hogback had not left Thriller Bark with nothing. When he fled the immense boat with Absalom and the unconscious Moria, he had taken several things, his lab equipment and the most powerful zombies that he could find and pack in. The soldier zombies weren't worth bothering with, but he had taken 2 of the more powerful zombies with them. Specifically the bodies of the samurai Ryuma, and the body of Perona's favorite zombie and the closest thing she had to a general zombie under her control, the teddy bear-looking creature which she called Bercy. The thing was actually a doll she had as a child. Sized up and given immense strength and speed, it wasn't to be underestimated. That creature aside, the body of the samurai was more important. It had been badly damaged, but over time Hogback had made it useful again. It was quite simple. The thing was not the most powerful of the general zombies for nothing. He had even retrieved his original sword from the grave of Roronoa Zoro, the Black Blade Shusui, which was a blade of immense quality, surpassing most modern-day blades such as the Kusanagi or the Raijin. That was the body he had granted Zaraki Kenpachi. The insane mind and incredible style, jutsu and insanity of Zaraki Kenpachi, combined with the immensely powerful body of the legendary samurai Ryuma, and wielding the black sword Shusui, which was one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, sword in the world. It was definitely the most powerful sword in the elemental countries. All of that added up to an absolute badass rivaling the Raiga Nidaime combo. He had some great fun training with him with all of the general zombies. However, all good things come to an end. In the last month before his return, he had made accommodations for his group during his absence. Absalom lived in the mountains with Hogback, assisting him in the creation of the zombies with his insight into what tactical value certain things would have in a fight. Yukino and Haruka had to go into hiding since they were too vital to send wandering around. As a result, he had them join the 2 members of the 3 Enigmas in the mountain caves, and he had increased the rations in the caves to mirror the growing population. Perona, however, would be living with him in Konoha. She wouldn't be seen by anyone, he would make sure of that. Normally he wouldn't allow it, but she was quite possessive of him, always calling him Naruto-kun and always acting strangely when he was around. Quite frankly, he was afraid of being raped one day by the girl. She absolutely refused to stay in the caves, so he had to let her stay with him. When he told her that, she was absolutely overjoyed. In the last week before his return, he had gone to the cave where he was supposed to be all this time and had returned his shadow to its normal place. It had been training a lot in the last year, studiously reading the scrolls that he had obtained and training its body, even though its strength could not be increased through such methods. His shadow grew stronger as he grew stronger, not the other way around. He did, however, learn what it learned, and it had read about 100 pounds worth of books and scrolls on all things ninja. It was a lot like releasing about 10,000 Kage Bunshin at once. Normally this experience would blow his mind more effectively than a 50 caliber bullet at point-blank range, but thank God he had QB. She could slow the intake of the memories so that he could absorb them at a survivable and comfortable rate, a little each day. He wouldn't absorb the entire thing for about 6 months, but that was better than becoming a vegetable or worse. He had spent the time before his return resting and meditating in the cave to help speed up the process. Now the day had come, his return to the days of pretending to be what he was not, an innocent, careless boy with some amazing abilities. Mind you, he could act quite a bit colder than he had before. A year of training in solitude would naturally force one to grow more contemplative and wary, so he could drop the idiot persona around the old man and adopt a more mature one instead, no longer rushing through things with reckless abandon when the goat was around, and slowly let the methodical genius peek through. Not the evil though, no, that would be well hidden, but he no longer had to play the fool. Now he could play the much more enjoyable role of the detached, serious, and skilled. He wouldn't be an emo by any means. He did have a sense of humor, albeit twisted. He could be enjoyable to be around, but you wouldn't hear him screaming something like Databeo in this lifetime. When he passed through the gates, the gatekeepers looked at him with scorn, not that he cared. He just flashed the letter the Sandame had given him to allow him back into the village on this specific day, and went to the library to return copies of the books and scrolls that he had borrowed. The real manuscripts he was keeping in the caves. The ones he stole from the ninja-only libraries were in the caves as well. He made his way to the Hokage Tower, steadying himself to not kill the old goat when he saw that smiling face that he wanted nothing more than to beat to a no longer living pulp. It wouldn't do well to break cover now. The hidden knife kills the foe, not the one they saw coming. When he made his way to the Hokage Tower, he got plenty of mutters from the assembled crowd. Damn, I thought he was dead. Why did he have to come back? Can't he tell he isn't wanted? And other such things were heard if you listened hard enough. Only one guy had the balls to come forward and yell, "Why the hell did you have to come back, you hellspawn?" Naruto just continued onward, giving him the bird and saying, "Love you too, but I love your daughter even more." As he continued into the building, the man in question would be irritable and humiliated for the rest of the day, as his daughter, well, she wasn't what you would call a pure virgin. He got more or less the same treatment from the people inside the building, including the secretary, who attempted to bar his access to the Hogake's office. He just tossed the letter saying that he should come straight to the old man's office when he returned on the woman's desk and pushed past her without giving her a second glance. He knocked once on the door and continued in when he heard the aged ninja say in a voice that sounded like he was bored to tears, "Enter." Naruto entered the decent-sized office and saw the Sandame at his desk furiously combating a tower of paperwork as high as he was tall sitting on his desk. A more caring or empathetic person would have told the old man the possible benefits of Kage Bunshin in such a situation, but he just really couldn't be bothered. He watched the man fight the flat white menace that threatened all things useful and efficient. Eventually the man noticed that it was Naruto in his office instead of the usual Chunin there to assist his hated enemy, and immediately rose to greet the boy. "Naruto-kun, how have you been, my boy? I was expecting you to be here a little earlier." Naruto just looked at him and let a small, if fake, smile grace his lips before saying, "I'm great, Aji-san. I've gotten a lot stronger than I was when I left. I have also gained a lot of control over my abilities, and a lot of insight into how the world works. I've never felt better." Old Sarutobi sat down again and smiled at the boy. He was a bit colder than he expected, but the innocence that the boy once brimmed with could not truly coexist with experience. It was one or the other. He sounded a lot more confident, and he had grown a bit too, and not just in body. Unsurprising, since he was now 9 years old, and had been fending for himself for quite a while. The academy started the year yesterday, and Naruto was finally old enough to enroll, albeit a little late. He would have started last year at 8, but he wanted to leave for that trip, and the Sandame, seeing how the teachers would probably treat him, had to agree that training on his own would be best. Now he knew how to train himself, and any corrupt teachers wouldn't be able to sabotage the delicate early education that, if denied him, would probably ruin his career before it really began. He would be a little older than his peers, but that was okay. He told the boy, "I am glad that you are okay, Naruto. I worried a bit about what kind of things you might find out there, but my worries had no basis, it seems." Naruto just nodded and he continued on, "So, the academy started up yesterday, so you will have a little catching up to do under normal circumstances, but I think you learned more than what they already know during the last year. You might even teach them a few things, Naruto-kun. Here, take this and give it to the woman at the academy's front desk tomorrow at 8 a.m. when classes start. Make me proud, my boy." Naruto took the paper that the aged ninja offered him and smiled, saying, "I will, Aji-san," before leaving the room. He looked at the paper that he was given. I had the address of the academy on it and the notice that he was to join a specific class, nothing special. He got out of the tower, inwardly gagging from the tone and the smile he had used in that accursed old man's presence. The Sandaime smiled as the boy left. He would make a good ninja and maybe one day a fine successor to his father. In the meantime, he had this monstrosity to face. He sat down and took up a pen and the topmost file of the pile of paperwork that had grown a few inches while he wasn't looking. He put pen to paper before blaring at the large stack and said, "Bring it on, motherfucker, round 2. Naruto's home, aka Demon House, aka Lair of the Beast, and all sorts of other good names given by the kind populace of Konoha, those loving souls." Naruto finally got to his house and found it in much better condition than he had left it. The rotting wood was no more, the broken windows were replaced, the lawn was trimmed, and the place looked livable. The only thing that turned it away from the populace was the fact that he lived there and the incinerating barrier around the fence. When he got to the front gate, he found a large pile of ash in front of it, most likely the remains of at least 3 people who had walked into the field of deadly energy. "Dumb bastards," Naruto muttered to himself as he dispelled the barrier in front of the gate and stepped through, blowing the ash away with a small futon jutsu. He walked up to the door and walked in, closing the door behind him, and looked around. The place was in pristine condition. The portraits were newly polished and the place was in better shape than it had been in decades. Naruto looked through several rooms, empty but well cleaned. His own room was creepy as ever, no windows, large king-size bed, pictures of horrible atrocities, same as he left it. The only question was where the hell all the zombies were. No one ever came to his house unless they were the Sandaime, or they were there to kill him. As a result, they usually roamed the halls, looking to sate their boredom, but he hadn't seen hide or hair of the undead since he got there, except the portrait zombies. They were still there. He descended to the basement, looking for his creations, and he inevitably found them. They were all in the basement, hopelessly drunk. Even if they were undead, they could still get absolutely sloshed apparently. He noticed that Hilden had a bottle of red wine almost as big as he was strapped to his back. Something told him he would see that bottle of wine a lot more often. Rei was sleeping in her lingerie near the back, and they were all passed out. Oh well, he thought, at least they didn't make a mess. Naruto examined his basement freezers and laboratories. They were all in spotless condition. He decided that he would send some of the bodies to Hogback later. He was running out of them since it took several human corpses to create one soldier zombie, and dozens more to create a general zombie, unless the base was of great power such as the Nidaimes or the Shodaimes were. Naruto stepped into a nearby shadow and entered the caves via a Kagehoku. When he returned a minute later, he had Perona and the recently resurrected Bercy with him. Perona loved the thing, and he could kind of understand that. A 6-foot-tall, awkward-looking teddy bear with an immense hat, a doctor's mask, eyes out of The Simpsons, and devil's horns, completely lovable. She was currently hanging onto Naruto's left arm. You can let go now, Perona-chan." She rubbed against his arm and said, "Oh, but I don't want to. Naruto-kun is so warm. I could stay here all day." "Oh geez," he put a hand on Perona's chin and lifted her head up to meet his eyes and said to her, Now, Perona-chan, we can't pick out your room if you're clinging to me like this. Besides, I kind of like circulation in that arm." She sighed dramatically and reluctantly let go. "Okay, Naruto-kun, you win this time. Let's go pick out my room then, shall we?" He nodded and she went upstairs, looking around, and the silent Bercy following her. She apparently really liked the portraits. Perona was a rather strange person in Naruto's opinion. She was one of the more dangerous people alive in a fight given time to get going, yet can be incredibly childish. She had been alive for centuries and was obsessed by things that were, in her opinion, cute. She acted exactly like she did way back during the Age of Pirates, when she assisted in the running of Thriller Bark, despite centuries having passed since then. She was also very strict with those placed under her and a harsh disciplinarian to the same. She would have been a good sensei for that one jounin, Hataki Kakashi. She wouldn't have let him be late, ever. However, despite her looks, she had never had a boyfriend before or a significant other. She lived alone for most of her life, especially once consuming one of the devil fruits and gaining her powers. Ever since then she lived alone until she was 11 when she met Moria and helped establish Thriller Bark. After their defeat at the hands of the Straw Hat Pirates, she lived as a spirit. As a result, she had very little experience in such a relationship, although it was not a relationship. She basically relied on him for emotional comfort and was very clingy, never letting him be alone with another woman if she could prevent it. He had no doubt that this would eventually grow into something more physical once he had aged sufficiently, but he couldn't complain. Her body would never age from its current beauty and perfection, and her abilities were terrifying since her ghosts made anyone a living target, could decimate rock and buildings, and she could see, hear, and communicate using them. She was a scout and a demolitionist all in one. He would live for a very long time, and he didn't mind her being at his side. She wouldn't be the only one, and she knew it. When she found out, she confronted him on it, and her exact words were, "I don't care if you're somebody else's too, but you are still my Naruto-kun." She was a real paradox, childish at one moment, mature and serious the next. She was willing to share him with others, but more than willing to make it hard as hell for any woman to get that close. It was a strange thing. Regardless of his current affairs regarding women, he had work to do. He went up to his room and prepared a few things. He had the academy in the morning. The next morning, Naruto awoke in his king-sized bed under the black quilt on blood-red silk sheets. The reason was his own biological clock waking him at exactly 8 a.m. There was, however, a strange lump under the bedspread. Don't tell me, he thought as he looked under the covers and saw none other than the ghost princess grabbing him around the midsection, sound asleep and wearing nothing more than a pink silk nightgown. This was actually the first time he had seen her without her crown, which was odd since she had slept with it before. Couldn't have been far. He looked up and saw it there on the bedside table next to his top hat. He tried to break away from her vice grip, but she just held on tighter. "I'm going to have to get used to this, aren't I?" he thought, and as thought she could read his thoughts. Perona's head nodded once despite being totally out of it. He sighed and got to work on extricating himself from the bear hug. 30 minutes later, the Ninja Academy. Naruto was walking down the hall to his class. He had managed to somehow escape Perona's grasp, despite her warmth and lack of clothing under her nightgown. After that, he had shunshined to the academy, and after giving the note to the QB-hating bitch of a secretary, he had gone to the room she directed him to. He idly thought, "My emo senses are tingling," as he neared the appropriate door. He entered the room and saw the rather rotund man teaching the class. The man saw him and said, "Ah, this must be the new student I told you all about. Come in and introduce yourself." Naruto stepped in front of the room and said, "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I would say that it was nice to meet you all, and it will be pleasant learning with you, but it would be a horrific lie." About 3/4 of the class erupted into laughter. Naruto focused on those who didn't. They were the ones who would be making it to Genin more likely than not. There were a few, but 3 in particular stood out. One of them was a girl with her hair in 2 buns. The second was a strange-looking boy with large eyebrows and eyes that were a male version of Perona's, and the third was a long-haired Hyuga in the back that reeked of angst, arrogance, and other things that would likely be beaten out of him eventually, with any luck. The man who was teaching the class stopped chuckling and said, "Very funny, Uzumaki-san. Just sit wherever you want. I am Funny no Daikoku, by the way. Daikoku-sensei to you." Naruto nodded and took a seat near the back, yet away from the rest, and rested his head on one hand. This was going to be a boring 3 years. Good thing he brought plenty of chocolate.